Chapter 857. After another 2 days, Rinpoche walked out of the palace while trembling with his hands on his waist. Seeing the sun that he hadn't seen for a long time, he felt like he had just survived a disaster. Other than surviving a calamity, there was also a guilty conscience. "I've already restrained my strength," the Water Empress said apologetically as she walked out from behind Rinpoche. He had indeed held back, or else his hip bone would have been broken into 18 pieces. But that wasn't the problem. Rinpoche felt that he would be blown away by a gust of wind. Even his bone marrow would drop by half a kilogram. "Your Majesty, Your Highness, lunch is ready. Would you like to eat now?" Qing Yuan asked with her head lowered. "Send it to." The Empress looked around. She couldn't stay in this palace anymore. It was as if a road roller had run over it. Furthermore, this palace might collapse at any moment. "Send it to Yaohua Palace and have someone clean it up. Hung Wan, go inform the clinic." Then, with a slight headache, he said, "It is indeed time to build a new palace." The roaring emperor had dug the bottom of the palace like a sieve. It wouldn't be a problem if it was a normal residence, but if there were other circumstances, it might collapse at any time. They couldn't possibly collapse every few days, right? "Let's eat first." Rinpoche really didn't have the energy to think about the new palace and the new city. Both of them arrived at Yaohua Palace. Rinpoche looked at the surroundings. Many places were decorated with pink and there were even some clay figurines. He couldn't help but ask, "Are there people living here?" One had to know that the 2 previous emperors of the Aboriginals didn't have many palaces and 6 courtyards, and they had very few children. Most of the palaces in the palace that they took over after purchasing the Hao Nation were empty. Although there would be people cleaning up the empty palaces, they wouldn't do it too often. It was inevitable that they would accumulate dust. Moreover, since no one lived in them for a long time, the palaces were rather cold and gloomy, and some were even dilapidated. However, this hall of fragrance looked different. It seemed like someone cleaned it every day. Rinpoche turned his head and saw a porcelain vase with a flower in it on a table. The Empress looked at the decorations around her with a look of reminiscence in her eyes and said, "I used to live here when I was young. In the past few years I would often come back to take a look. It's just that I haven't come back as often in the past 2 years. But the decorations are the same as when I was young, even the flowers in the vase are the same." "Your Majesty used to like pink? I thought Your Majesty always liked red." "Pink doesn't suit me," the Empress said faintly. Rinpoche understood. Pink was the color of young girls. Since the Empress was in this position, she naturally couldn't act the same as before. Especially at that time, she was just a young girl who didn't know anything. "Let's use this place as my bedroom for now. Dig up the ground of the collapsed palace and rebuild it. If this place is destroyed, His Majesty will be distressed. Furthermore, building a new palace isn't something that can be completed in a short period of time." The Empress glared at him after he finished speaking. After eating breakfast and drinking a bowl of freshly fried bushen tang, Rinpoche finally felt alive again. Looking in the mirror, he didn't lose too much weight this time. He only lost about 10 to 20 kilograms. In his body, the life force that came from the Empress had not been completely digested. This time it had increased a little, but the amount was much less than the previous time. It was only 1/10 of the previous time. After lunch, the Empress summoned all the court officials into the palace to discuss some matters. On the other hand, Rinpoche took out a piece of paper and a pen to list out the things that he needed to do in the near future. The first thing was education. This was the most important thing. If he wanted to expand the scope of education, it would be very difficult to do it alone. Even with the help of his students, it would still be too slow. There were dozens of students a year, and the number was increasing year by year. Even if all these students became elementary teachers, it would take at least more than 10 years for there to be enough teachers to popularize education. However, the various departments of the imperial court also lacked a large number of talents. How could they let all the students become elementary school teachers? Even so, the standard of education within a short period of time wouldn't exceed the 3rd grade of junior high school. If he wanted to train a large number of high school talents, he would need decades of accumulation. His goal was to train a large number of junior high and even senior high school students within 10 years, as well as a portion of high school talents. To achieve this, he had to rely on some other forces. There were only a few options to rapidly spread basic education throughout Dayo in a short period of time. The first option was robots. It was now 2029 on Earth, and educational robots were already quite mature. Of course, most of the time they were still used as assistants. Furthermore, it was difficult to reach the stage of educating high school talents. Furthermore, there was another point. If these things were broken, they couldn't be repaired. It was very difficult to rely on robots as teachers. The second option was distance education. However, the drawbacks were similar to that of robots, and it was even more troublesome. Even if he could achieve both of these, there was still a very important point. Although he could record the books he read on that planet in his sea of knowledge, it didn't mean that he was capable of educating high school level students. After thinking about it, Rinpoche put this matter aside for now and wrote down another matter. He had to embark on the path of science and technology with the characteristics of this world. This world wasn't Earth. The composition of the air was different from that of Earth, and the elements were also different. At present, he already knew that there were a few more elements than on Earth, but he didn't know if there were any missing elements. In addition, he hadn't found any traces of oil yet. This kind of situation was bound to happen again in the future. Therefore, it was impossible to completely copy technology. He had to develop a technology that was unique to this world, that was suitable for the situation in this world. After thinking about it, Rinpoche wrote the word kidnap on the paper. That's right, kidnap people from Earth, set up a laboratory, study the differences between this world and Earth, and develop a replacement or similar technology. After all, he couldn't completely rely on the research institute on Earth. Moreover, there was another advantage to doing this, and that was that these high-end talents that they had kidnapped could teach students at the level of a university or even higher. In that case, he had to have a capable helper on Earth. It couldn't be Rin Wanyin or Ding Jie, as they couldn't do this kind of thing. It also couldn't be the winged cavalry. First of all, this person couldn't be too eye-catching. At least, he couldn't look like someone from the Zenith Star. Second, he had to have enough wisdom and action to do things well. Finally, he had to be quite skilled. The winged cavalry couldn't meet the first two requirements. Rinpoche already had a candidate in mind, but he had to meet him first. After sending him there, he wouldn't be able to come back. This was the only way he could completely control him. The third thing was to expand the scale of the embroidered uniform guards in the rearguard commandery, as they were currently understaffed. Next, in addition to the situation in the Yun Nation and Tianjin Basin, he had to investigate the various sects and experts in the world and collect talented young people. The fourth point was to make money, which was actually relatively easy. The fifth point was to choose a location for the new palace in the capital city and carry out planning. This was difficult for others, especially when planning the new palace in the capital city, which needed to be considered in all aspects. However, Rinpoche felt that this was simply too easy for him. As long as he chose a location and made a similar image of the planet in his mind, he could build it at will and see the results. It was even easier than using a computer to make renderings. The sixth point was to investigate all the mineral resources in Dayo and the Yun Nation, make arrangements, and expand production. The steam equipment in the mines also needed to be developed. After all, manpower was precious, and there were too many places that required manpower. Chapter 858. In the 60,000 Mountains. A few figures stood at the top of the mountain and looked down at a giant beast that was running. It was 8 meters tall and was at the peak of the earth wheel level. In most places, it was at the top of the food chain. After all, beasts with the strength of a spirit wheel expert were the overlords of the 60,000 mountains and were rare. However, the giant beast below was fleeing in panic as if it was being chased by something. A figure that was smaller than the giant beast did a somersault in the air and landed on its back. At the same time, he slammed his right hand down. The giant beast let out a wail as its limbs could no longer support its body. It collapsed and slid on the ground for dozens of meters before coming to a stop. Following that, several figures jumped down from the mountain and appeared beside the giant beast in a few flashes. A woman with a furry tail stepped forward to cut up the beast while the others did their own things. These figures were from the foreign races that Rinpoche had met once before. There was Chiao Sun from the Heaven Seeker race with a cat-like beard and round nose, Lei Hua from the Thunder Barbarian race with 2 horns on his head, Gu Ling from the 8-armed race with 4 arms, Sun Yu from the Baixiang race with a furry tail, Ta Lan from the Wind-chasing race with 2 hooves, Su Heng from the Void race with growth rings on his penis, and Lu Sheng from the Snake race with a snake's tail and a human body. Lei Hua stood on the corpse of the giant beast and looked around. "Did you find anything?" Chiao Sun asked. "It's a little familiar." Lei Hua was delighted. "I've been here before. It should be close to my tribe." Although nearly 100 years had passed, everyone only had memories of the past 6 months, and those memories seemed to be from a year ago. The 4-armed Gu Ling's eyes flickered. Since this place wasn't far from the Thunder Barbarian village, it wouldn't be too far from the 8-armed race's village either. "Congratulations to the 2 of you." Chiao Sun smiled at them. "Thank you." Both of them thanked Chiao Sun solemnly. If it weren't for him, they didn't know how long it would take for them to find their original range of activity. Next they started a fire to roast the meat. Everyone was silent, and Lei Hua and Gu Ling were even more distracted. After 100 years they could finally go home. The two of them were eager to return home and couldn't wait to go back and have a look. At the same time he was a little nervous. He didn't know what had changed in the village in the past 100 years. After everyone finished their meal, Lei Hua stood up and said, "Everyone, I will take my leave first. If we meet again in the future, I will treat everyone to a good drink." Everyone nodded and smiled. Gu Ling also cupped his hands at the crowd. Then he looked at Lei Hua and said, "If we meet again in the future, we will fight to the death." The hatred between the two clans was not something that could be easily erased. Lei Hua immediately laughed heartily. "As you wish." The two of them didn't say anything else and left in a flash. Although they had similar encounters and had been working together for more than 8 months, they were only a little more familiar with each other. They were not that close. After all, these 7 people belonged to different races and they were all experts. To be able to stay by the herdsman's side for so long, they were all extremely talented people. They were originally favored by the heavens in their strongholds. It was already rare for them to be able to work together for so long. It would be more difficult to warm up to them. After the two of them left, the remaining people felt even more anxious. According to the distance, this place should not be too far from their homes. Everyone looked at Qiao. Senator Qiao Sen casually picked up a branch beside him and threw it into the air. When it landed, he pointed in a direction. "Let's go this way." Lei Hua climbed over a few mountains. The surrounding scenery became more and more familiar. He felt more and more anxious, as if something was about to jump out of his heart. Roar! Lei Hua let out a loud roar. A moment later, a voice came from the top of the mountain. "Who is it?" Lei Hua felt his chest beating violently. He couldn't wait to brag. In a few flashes he arrived at the top of the mountain. However, what greeted him was the sound of weapons tearing through the air. "It's me. Stop." Lei Hua immediately shouted. A bone rod stopped not far from him. A few men and women looked at him from afar and revealed puzzled expressions. "Who are you?" There were only about 200 people in the Thunder Barbarian tribe. It was impossible that they didn't know anyone. Lei Hua stared at one of them. Lei. He felt that the person in front of him was familiar, but he was older than he remembered. As for the others, he didn't know any of them. They seemed to be the new generation in recent years. 100 years was a lifetime for humans. It was also a long time for the Thunder Barbarian tribe. "Who are you?" The person who answered was a woman. She was naked and only wore a leather skirt. Her face was full of doubt. "I'm Lei Hua. I'm back." Lei's face revealed an ecstatic expression. "Lei Hua." Lei muttered softly. Then her face was full of disbelief. "Lei Hua. That's right. It's me. Where have you been all these years?" Lei's eyes widened. She carefully sized Lei Hua up and down. Then hatred appeared on her face. "Why did you suddenly leave 117 years ago?" 117 years. Lei Hua was slightly stunned. He thought that it had been more than 70 years. He didn't expect it to be more than 110 years. It seemed that the time when everyone was captured was very different. Then her face turned slightly gloomy. "It's a long story. I was captured. Let's go back to the village first." After a while, Lei Hua arrived in front of a village. Without waiting for anyone else, he immediately rushed in a certain direction. In the village, there were pointy buildings that were completely different from those of the Aboriginals. They were scattered throughout the village. In fact, the beasts were not much of a threat to the Thunder Barbarians. The so-called village was just a settlement without walls. Lei Hua stopped in front of a house. It was the most familiar place in his memory. However, when he pushed the door open and rushed into the house, he saw an unfamiliar young man. Lei Hua's expression changed. "Where's Lei Duo?" The young man looked at him blankly. "Who's Lei Duo?" Lei Hua's body suddenly froze. Then, his skin turned green, and a ferocious expression appeared on his face. "I'm asking you where Lei Duo is." "Lei Hua." Lei rushed into the house. "Your sister is dead. She died more than 80 years ago." "What?" Lei Hua was stunned as if he had been struck by lightning. "She thought that you were harmed by the 8-arm race. In order to avenge you, she fought with the 8-arm race many times. In the end, she died in battle," Lei said with an ugly expression. "What did you say?" Lei Hua asked in a daze. Lei Hua's expression seemed to be frozen on his face. However, his aura rose and the green color on his body became darker. There were even electric currents appearing on the surface of his skin. "Calm down. You should meet the elder first. Lei said. Her expression was a little gloomy. In the past she had a good relationship with Lei Hua and Lei Duo. When Lei Hua had disappeared, she had been sad for a period of time. Lei Duo had died in battle and she wanted to avenge her. However, she was still too weak. Or rather, Gu Zhen was too strong. However, the most important thing now was to calm Lei Hua down. 8-arm race. Lei Hua let out an angry roar. Electric currents flowed along his skin and hit the wooden plank beside his feet. The wooden plank started to smoke. To others, Lei Duo was someone from more than 80 years ago. However, to him, it was as if he had only left for a year. When Lei Hua saw this, he was pleasantly surprised and sorrowful. He was pleasantly surprised that Lei Hua had comprehended Thunder Flow. He might even be able to defeat Gu Zhen. Lei Hua's talent was indeed the best. If he had not left, the Thunder Barbarians would not have been suppressed for decades. He was sorrowful that he had returned too late. The dead would not be able to live. Chapter 859. Lei Hua did not have the chance to vent his anger. After all, the news of his return to the village had already reached the ears of the elders along with the other young men. A moment later, he appeared in a house, and around him were a few old men with wrinkles all over their faces. Above them was a dignified Thunder Barbarian. Lei Hua, I didn't expect you to be alive. You said you were captured? What happened? Who did it? An old man asked in a deep voice. Although the old men's faces were wrinkled, they all looked ferocious. Blue veins bulged on their exposed skin. They're called herdsmen. Lei Hua told them what he knew and what had happened along the way. Herdsmen? What's that? I've heard of the Heaven Hunters, the Wind Chasers, and the Void Tribe. But where did these herdsmen come from? Why haven't I heard of them? And what method did they use to capture Lei Hua? No matter where they came from, as long as we catch them, we must avenge them. That's right. How dare they capture people of our Thunder Barbarian tribe? If we find them, we must not let them go. That girl called Guna was also captured? She actually came back alive. Human tribe? Abandoned tribe? I haven't heard any news about the human tribe for a long time. It said that they're a weak, treacherous, despicable, and treacherous race. Guna from the Babai tribe and Gu Zhen, now the Babai tribe has 2 geniuses. So what if they have 2 geniuses? I see that Lei Hua has just comprehended Thunder Flow. He can fight against Gu Zhen. Guna was originally weaker than Lei Hua. Even if she came back to life, Lei Hua will still be far behind her. The burly man sitting at the head of the table seemed to have lost his soul. After a while, he opened a wooden board and found a book made of animal skin. Sure enough, there are herdsmen in this book. The burly man flipped through the book and laughed. I remember seeing this somewhere. Then he frowned. Herdsman. Following orders to monitor the abandoned people? Strange abilities? Belonging to the 6 heavens? Why are there only a few words? The abandoned people retreated to the barren land, never to return for thousands of years? This is the book passed down from generation to generation, right? Who are the 6 heavens? Return to what? What does it say? The few old men immediately asked. I don't know. The next page was torn off. The patriarch of the Thunder Barbarian tribe touched his head and smiled bitterly. Who is so daring? You even dare to tear the clan heirloom that has been passed down from generation to generation? By the time I got it, it was already gone. Who knows which clan leader tore it apart? But there's one thing we can be sure of. The herdsman is probably monitoring the abandoned people. And those abandoned people seem to be related to us. I remember that when I took over the position of patriarch, that old man told me something. The burly man crossed his arms and thought hard, but he couldn't remember what he had been told. Pass down my orders. In the future, if you see those things called herdsmen, immediately report to me. Since they dared to touch our lightning barbarians, we can't let them go. In the largest house of the Babai tribe, a woman with 6 arms sat and listened to Guna's report. After listening, she said faintly, I didn't expect you to encounter these people and those abandoned people. You said that they have a powerful weapon, right? Although I haven't seen it before, I saw the aftermath of the weapon's destruction. Not a single blade of grass grew within a radius of more than a kilometer, and everything was turned into ashes. Those abandoned people have actually grown up again. No matter what, it seems like they have completely forgotten what happened back then. However, I'm afraid they will be aware of it this time. Back then? You don't need to know about this. You may leave. The 6-armed woman waved her hand. After Guna left, she said faintly, I don't know if we will return to the legendary ancestral land. If those abandoned people really come back, maybe we will have a chance to go back. In that case, I should be hoping that they come back. Under the protection of the guards, Rinpoche arrived near Jing Street. He looked at the homecoming tavern in front of him, waved his hand and said, "Wait for me outside." There was a row of iron crotches in front of the tavern. He didn't know how that egg-kicking maniac got mixed up with the crossdresser and was in cahoots with each other. One was in charge of egg-kicking and the other was in charge of selling iron crotches. Rinpoche felt that Li Fu was simply a disgrace among the top experts. "Lady boss, there's a guest. Come out and receive the guest," Rinpoche shouted as soon as he entered the tavern. "Oh, there's a distinguished guest today. Isn't this Zhao Prince Consort? How do you want me to receive the guest? How did you lose so much weight?" Ning Kaichen, who was swaying her body, walked out from inside. She was wearing a purple robe, and her hair was tied up in a great xia bun with a pink flower on it. Her eyes seemed to be filled with water, and she was extremely charming. After not seeing her for a long time, Ning Kaichen was still a crossdresser who looked more like a woman than a woman. Furthermore, it seemed like she had improved. However, Rinpoche's face darkened after hearing her words. How did she lose so much weight? It was a long story. Rinpoche sighed slightly and looked around. There was a wooden bottle on every table with a bouquet of flowers in it. The entire tavern was filled with the fragrance of flowers. It had to be said that Ning Kaichen was going further and further down the road of feminization. "Your Highness, do you want to come inside and let me serve you?" Ning Kaichen sat opposite Rinpoche with a seductive look on her face, causing him to tremble on the spot. "Come on." Rinpoche quickly waved his hand. "Looking at you, you seem to be doing pretty well." "What do you think, sir?" Ning Kaichen's eyes turned red. "I'm now living in seclusion, unable to return to my home, and unable to acknowledge my relatives. Does your Highness think that I'm doing well?" Rinpoche was slightly taken aback. "Do you want to return to Great Xia?" It seemed normal when he thought about it. Even though Ning Kaichen had become like this, it was normal for her to want to go back and take a look. Unfortunately, he couldn't go back with his original identity. He didn't expect Ning Kaichen to roll her eyes and ask, "Why should I go back? That bunch of old guys are always pointing fingers at me. Now that I'm free and have the body of a woman, I'm many times happier than before. Why should I go back and take care of those old guys? Besides, if I go back, those old guys will be furious." Rinpoche didn't understand the situation with the Ning family, but he believed the last sentence. If Ning Kaichen went back with this seductive look, the ancestors of the Ning family wouldn't be able to keep their coffins closed. "Are you really not going back?" Rinpoche asked with a smile. Ning Kaichen felt aggrieved and replied, "Of course not. Besides, I can't go back even if I want to. What I want now is to find someone to marry and then spend the rest of my life as a wife and children. However, who would dare to marry me like this? In that case, do you have any ideas of doing something for me? However, I have to leave Great Xia and even Deo far away. I won't be able to go back in the future and completely cut myself off from my past. As for the benefits, I can make you a real woman." Before Rinpoche could finish speaking, Ning Kaichen pressed the table and stood up. Is what Zhao Prince Consort said true? She couldn't contain her excitement. She spun around on the ground twice and muttered, "How is this possible? How is this possible? How is this possible? Your Highness, are you lying to me?" "Let me finish." Rinpoche stretched out his hand and pressed it down. "You still can't give birth, but it can make you like a woman in other aspects. Whatever a woman can do, you can also do. Whatever a woman can enjoy, you can also enjoy. In short, it will make you a real woman, except that you can't give birth. Are you really not lying to me, Your Highness?" Ning Kaichen was both excited and doubtful. How could this be done? Why would I lie to you? I want you to do things for me and I can naturally do what I promised you. Otherwise, how can I let my subordinates work with peace of mind? However, the price is that you can no longer return to this land. Of course, if you do your job well, I can help you collect some materials for the sword cultivation pool so that you can nurture swords and extend your lifespan to at least the same as an ordinary person's. Before Rinpoche could ask if she was willing, Ning Kaichen hurriedly said, "I'm willing. Of course I'm willing." It was as if she was afraid that he would go back on his word. "Just don't regret it in the future," Rinpoche said faintly. "I won't regret it. Your Highness, you don't know what it's like to have such a body that is neither male nor female. As long as I can become a real woman, I won't regret it no matter what lies ahead." Rinpoche looked at Ning Kaichen. Earth might be a better place for Ning Kaichen. Once he went there, he couldn't come back. This way he would be in complete control because he had no other choice. In terms of strength, Ning Kaichen, who had a spirit sword, wasn't weak at all and was even stronger than an ordinary earth wheel expert. In terms of temperament and wisdom, Ning Kaichen wasn't bad either. All he had to do was send her to the kingdom of Thailand. Get ready. There's no need for the things here. I'll get someone to bring you in before you arrive at the palace tonight. Your Highness, where are you going to send me? What are you going to do? Ning Kaichen asked. Just now, he didn't ask what Rinpoche wanted him to do and immediately agreed. This showed how attractive a 3-day trip to the Thai kingdom was to him. It's far away from Great Xia and Dayo. From your tone, it's not the Qin kingdom. Where would it be? You don't need to know too much now. I can tell you that the task isn't difficult. Besides, life there is much more comfortable than here. Rinpoche smiled, got up and walked out. Bring your spirit sword. It's called green bead, right? I got it. After choosing the person, there was nothing else to worry about. The next step was to decide on the Empress's relatives. After all, it was a little outrageous for the Empress to be alone. Forget about Hong Wu, Tong Jinye and the other bastards. None of them were good people, but as long as there was one, this wedding would be ruined by them. In fact, there were only a few people to choose from: Xinjia, Lin Xiaola, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan. Now there was Ning Kaichen. Chapter 860. Your Majesty, Your Highness, I have brought them here. Xinjia brought Ning Kaichen, who was dressed in purple and had a sword on her back and a small bag in her hand. Seeing the Empress, Ning Kaichen bowed slightly and used the etiquette of Great Xia women. Greetings, Your Majesty, Your Highness. The sword on her back trembled slightly. The Empress glanced at her and continued to focus on the laptop screen. Speaking of which, this laptop was a little old. Rinpoche was checking the leather bag in his hand, which contained the medicine for the nourishing soup. The medicine couldn't be stopped. He looked up at Ning Kaichen and said, I'll give you one last chance to back out. I'll never regret it. So be it. In fact, the other side is pretty good. There are mobile phones, computers, comics, TV series and movies. There are abundant resources, a rich life and plenty of food, drinks and entertainment, Rinpoche said. This was indeed the case. This world couldn't be compared to Earth in terms of resources and entertainment products. Of course, this was only for now. Although she didn't know what Rinpoche was talking about, Ning Kaichen was even more curious about where they were going. At the same time, she was curious about the clothes they were wearing. Rinpoche was wearing a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, the Empress was wearing a long red dress, and Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were also wearing long dresses. Their clothes looked very different from Dayo's. Rinpoche looked up and asked, Commander Xinjia, where are your casual clothes? Rinpoche had bought clothes for Xinjia on his previous trip to Earth. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan knew that they were going to be brought over this time, so they had already changed into their clothes. I've buried them. Xinjia pushed up her glasses. Rinpoche was confused. What did she mean by burying them? Forget it, let's go like this. I'll have to get someone to send 2 sets of clothes. Not only Xinjia, but also Ning Kaichen's clothes weren't suitable. She was excited to go back to Earth to see her good friend, the husky. However, she started to feel sleepy after 5 minutes of excitement. 10 minutes later, she was in a daze and was sitting on the ground, her head bobbing. Caught her. Rinpoche waved his hand. He originally wanted to get someone to cover Ning Kaichen's eyes, but it would only take a moment. Furthermore, he would be able to guess everything after coming into contact with Earth's knowledge, so there was no need. Rinpoche grabbed the Empress with one hand and grabbed Ning Kaichen with the other. Then the surroundings instantly changed. Everyone had already appeared in a hotel room. This is? Ning Kaichen widened her eyes and looked around. In an instant, everything around her had changed. The room wasn't big, but it was clean and tidy, with bright glass windows that let in the sun. In Ning Kaichen's eyes, the hotel's decorations were luxurious. In particular, the golden wallpaper at the back of the bed was simply vulgar in Rinpoche's eyes, but it was completely different in Ning Kaichen's eyes. More importantly, it was clearly night just now. How did it become daytime now? Lin Xiaola, who had arrived on Earth, was also energized. She squatted on the ground and raised her head. Oh, whoa, woof. Don't shout, your friend isn't here. He patted her head. Where is this? Ning Kaichen asked as she carefully sized up her surroundings. You will know in the future. Rinpoche looked at Ning Kaichen curiously. Green bead, how's your sword? Can you still command? Ning Kaichen didn't understand. She moved her fingers and green bead sneakily flew out of the scabbard. It circled around Ning Kaichen's waist as if trying to avoid the Empress's sight. It seems like it hasn't been affected. Rinpoche nodded. This was the best. The room was a suite with separate rooms. The empress took Qing Yuan, Hong Yuan and Xenja outside to watch television, leaving Ning Kaichen behind. Ren Baqin left her behind, went out for a walk and bought 2 sets of clothes. Xenja wore a suit, a short skirt and a white shirt. Ren Baqin always felt that it was more compatible with her bespectacled image. In this outfit she was simply the best candidate for a secretary. As for Ning Kaichen, she wore a pair of unisex clothes, long pants and a casual coat. Coupled with her seductive image, she looked quite like an older sister. The only flaw was that her chest was flat, even flatter than Lin Xiaola's. However, this wouldn't be the case after he returned from Thailand. "Your Highness, where exactly is this place? I looked outside just now and it seems to be a strange place." "Anyway, it's not any place that I know of," Ning Kaichen asked after changing according to Ren Baqin's instructions. As for how they arrived here from the palace of Dayo in an instant, he kept it to himself. However, he was curious about everything he saw, especially the metal boxes running along the road below. Were all the houses in this world so tall? What was that box with images and sounds coming from outside? Could there be a villain inside? If it wasn't for the faint stench in the air, he would have suspected that this was the residence of an immortal. "From now on, you will live here and do what I tell you to do. You can make your own arrangements for the rest of your time. As for where this place is, you will find out in the future." Ren Baqin smiled. Although this world was very different from the other world, with his imagination, it would probably take some time for him to realize that this was a different world. He called Qing Yuan, Hong Yuan, Xenja, Lin Xiaola, and Ning Kaichen together and said, "There are some matters that require you to pretend to be Her Majesty's relatives." "We don't dare," Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan hurriedly said. Pretending to be Her Majesty's relatives was equivalent to pretending to be members of the royal family. There's nothing to be afraid of. This time you have to pretend to be Her Majesty's relatives. Otherwise things will be difficult to handle. This is a serious matter. Xenja is Her Majesty's cousin, and the others are Her Majesty's cousins. Remember this. Also Ning Kaichen. You will pretend to be Her Majesty's good friend. I'm climbing up the social ladder. Ning Kaichen rolled his eyes. He probably wouldn't be able to change his flirtatious attitude. If they sent him on a 3-day trip to Thailand, he would probably become a demon when he came back. "What does Your Highness want us to do?" "Nothing much. Just hold a wedding according to the traditions of this world. That's all. Alright, just remember who you are. If someone asks you, just say so. I can show you around today." Ren Baqin clapped his hands. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan immediately looked happy. They had only gone out once before and spent the rest of their time in that villa. Both of them were curious about the outside world. Xenja's face was expressionless, while Lin Xiaola looked drowsy. Ning Kaichen, on the other hand, was rather interested and wanted to see what kind of world it was like outside. When everyone went downstairs, the receptionist was shocked. When did so many outstanding women go up? No one thought of the girls in the small carts. After all, with their eyesight they could tell at a glance. What made them curious was when so many outstanding women came to the hotel. After all, as long as they saw them once, they would never forget them. The hotel was in the city center, and Ren Baqin was ready to eat something first. However, he didn't go far before he saw a fight. Both of them were dressed like ordinary people, but they bumped into each other while walking. As a result, both of them were a little aggressive. "Are you blind? How can you say that? What's wrong? Damn, you're still so arrogant after bumping into me? I'll beat you up." It was basically the same as the usual, "What are you worried about? And what's wrong with looking at you?" The two of them immediately started fighting. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan didn't leave the palace often and didn't see many street fights. At this moment they were in high spirits and immediately clapped and cheered. This was the norm in Dayo. However, this was China, and 2 girls clapping and cheering immediately attracted a lot of strange looks. Ren Baqin didn't care about anything else. Instead, he felt that it was interesting. It wasn't because of their strength but because of their attitude. He felt that both of them were a little eager to give it a try, and then they started fighting. They weren't really bad-tempered, but more like they were looking for someone to test their skills. Ren Baqin stood at the side and observed that both of them were actually close to the manual level. Although their punches and kicks weren't very skillful, their speed and strength weren't bad. Ren Baqin was slightly surprised to see 2 people with such strength on the street. It was now the 4th year that China announced the 15th set of fitness Qigong. To be able to have such skills in the 4th year meant that they were pretty talented and had already pulled away from ordinary people. However, after thinking about it, it seemed to be very normal. After all, the population of China was 4 times that of Great Xia. People lived in affluence and were physically strong. Compared to the malnourished people of feudal society, the probability of having talented people was naturally higher. This is an era of great change, Rinpoche muttered to himself. Fortunately, it had only been around for a short period of time, and the impact wasn't too great. When the people gradually became man-will experts, the far-reaching impact of fitness Qigong would be seen. Chapter 861. Both of them were stronger than ordinary people, but they didn't have the same mental fortitude. In just a short while their faces were flushed. Rinpoche could clearly see that they were starting to be a little timid. Rinpoche crossed his arms and watched for a long time to see how this matter would be resolved in the end. In other words, he wanted to see how long it would take for someone to deal with this matter. Martial artists weren't ordinary people, and their destructive power was much greater than that of ordinary people. It was fine if it wasn't for a long time, but as time went on, the strength of ordinary people would increase, and their destructive power would increase dramatically. This society had been peaceful for too long. The sudden emergence of strength would change the mentality of many ordinary people and break the current balance. Rinpoche waited to see how long it would take for the relevant agencies to appear, which represented whether the country's current preparations were complete. 3 minutes. 3 minutes after the two men started fighting, someone rushed over. It was a man in a dark blue uniform with a black iron plate with the words Martial Enforcement Bureau pinned on his chest. His strength was similar to that of the two men. However, when he appeared, the two men obviously slowed down and each took a step back. "What are you doing? Private fights are strictly prohibited. What's wrong with the two of you? Come back to the bureau with me," the man shouted. He was the one who looked for trouble first. One of them said resentfully as blood flowed down his nose like tap water. "You obviously bumped into me first." The other man's eyes were like a panda's. Although the man's strength was similar to that of the two men, he grew up in a peaceful society and was obviously quite afraid of law enforcement agencies. The two men were quickly taken away. Rinpoche calculated that 3 minutes wasn't particularly fast, but it wasn't bad either. After all, a city was too big and the number of law enforcement personnel was limited. This speed showed that the country was quite well prepared to deal with the changes in the world. As for the Martial Enforcement Bureau, it was a newly established department that specialized in stopping martial artists from causing disturbances and arresting them. Of course, this referred to the experts at the man-will level. However, the current man-will experts were in the military in Wuxia City. Therefore, the martial enforcement officers were still responsible for these trivial matters, similar to the police. After watching this sudden fight, Qin Yuan and Hong Yuan were excited, while Ning Kaichen was deep in thought. It wasn't until it was time to eat that Ning Kaichen said, "The people here are very different." "What's the difference?" Rinpoche laughed. "His aura is different and so is his attitude," Ning Kaichen said as she scanned the surroundings. "I was born in Great Xia, but I've been to the Yun Nation and stayed in Dayo for so long. Although the commoners of the Aboriginals were poor, they had the highest level of willpower, which was completely different from other places. The commoners of other places, even the commoners of Great Xia, were mostly just trying to stay alive. It seemed that their only purpose in life was to stay alive. But the ancient race is different." Upon hearing Ning Kaichen's words, the Empress looked interested. She loved to hear people flattering her. Praising the Aboriginal commoners was also praising her. However, those people I saw just now had a stronger aura than the Aboriginal commoners. I've been observing along the way. These people should be ordinary citizens, but none of them are like the ones I've seen in Great Xia and the Yun Nation. I can't say for sure, but it's very different. "Are you talking about mental outlook?" Rinpoche laughed. "It's definitely different. Almost all of the commoners here had gone to school, and all of them were at least at the level of an elementary scholar. 80% of the young and middle-aged people had the knowledge of a high scholar, and were aware of what was happening all over the world. Their knowledge and thinking are superior to even the scholars, not to mention the commoners of Great Xia and the Yun Nation." "How is that possible?" Ning Kaichen was in disbelief. Great Xia had both civil and military examinations, so naturally there were also scholars. Ning Kaichen was born into a wealthy family and had even passed the imperial examination. Naturally, she knew the value of a scholar and a scholar. Generally, the advisors and aides of the officials in the county were all elementary scholars. As for a scholar, they could directly become an official. In the entire Great Xia, there were more than 300 million people. Only 2 out of 10 people were literate, and among these 2 literate people, there might not even be 1 scholar. Out of 100 scholars, only 1 could pass the imperial examination. It could be said that there was at least one scholar out of 1,000 people. As for the scholars, there were even fewer. However, almost everyone here was at the level of a scholar. 80% of the young and middle-aged people had the knowledge of a scholar? How could Ning Kaichen believe this? Furthermore, everyone could keep abreast of what was happening all over the world? How was that possible? Was everyone a deity who could see thousands of miles away? The Empress glanced at Rinpoche. She knew that almost everyone here had gone to school, but she had never heard Rinpoche make such a comparison. Rinpoche laughed. He did understand the examination system in Great Xia. Scholars had a high status, but their knowledge was equivalent to that of a junior high school student, and this was only in terms of ancient books and records. In terms of mathematics, it was equivalent to a primary school graduate. As for physics and chemistry, there was no need to talk about it. As for the scholars, they were at most at the level of high school or junior college. Similarly, this was only in terms of ancient books and records. In terms of mathematics, they were no higher than a junior high school student. As for physics and chemistry, they were equivalent to zero. Of course, they weren't completely useless. At the very least, in terms of reciting poems and soliciting prostitutes in brothels, they were much better than current students. Furthermore, they had their own ideas on how to govern the country. After all, those who could pass the imperial examination were all outstanding people. However, on the whole, they couldn't be compared. You will know in a few days. You will be staying here in the future, and you can go and see for yourself, Rinpoche said casually. No matter how he explained, it would be more useful to let him see for himself. After the meal, Rinpoche brought them to buy 2 sets of clothes and made 2 pairs of glasses for Xinjia. After that, they returned home and got busy again. Especially when they saw their daughter-in-law, Rinpoche's parents were grinning from ear to ear. The following day, Rinpoche led everyone around the city. In any case, he didn't need to prepare anything for the wedding as his family had already prepared everything. Ren Wanyan also rushed over from Wuji City with more than 20 winged cavalry warriors. On the day before Rinpoche's wedding, an acquaintance rushed over. Qingqing. To be honest, Rinpoche had a very good impression of him. At that time he was still an ordinary person, and Qingqing and Papa Chen did not let him down. However, he became busier and had too many responsibilities. As a result, he had less contact with Qingqing. However, the two of them still talked on the phone occasionally. As a result, other than his parents, relatives, and friends, only Qingqing knew that he was getting married here. Brother, I have arrived. Do you want to come out for a drink? Do you want me to hold a bachelor's party for you? Qingqing, who was on the other end of the phone, had a naughty smile on his face. Rinpoche's expression immediately became very interesting. Not far away, the Empress, who was playing with her phone, immediately pricked up her ears. Another bachelor's party? The Empress's mouth curled into a smile as she looked at Rinpoche. However, there was a dangerous glint in her eyes. Chapter 862. It's been a while. You seem to have lost some weight? You look even more spirited now. Qingqing laughed heartily as he welcomed Rinpoche. Previously, the two of them would occasionally video chat, so she knew about his figure for a period of time. This is. Qingqing looked at the delicate bespectacled lady behind Rinpoche and was slightly puzzled. This wasn't a bride. My sister-in-law? Rinpoche hesitated. The Empress was afraid that Rinpoche would cause trouble again, so she hired a bodyguard. If I'm not married yet, you must introduce your sister-in-law to me. Qingqing laughed heartily. Unfortunately, my son is already 10 years old. Let's sit down and talk. Rinpoche smiled. The two of them sat down. Rinpoche looked at Xinjia, pointed to the side and said, "Sit down. Don't stand behind me. It's scary." This was a very quiet bar and there were not many people around. An old folk song was floating in the bar. It sounded faint, but it had a vicissitudes of life, reminding people of the past. I once dreamed of traveling the world with a sword, but I cancelled my original plan because I was too fat. Hearing these words made one's heart ache. Beer then. Give her a juice. It had been a long time since Rinpoche drank beer. Qingqing took a close look at Rinpoche and sighed, "Time really flies. My son is already 10 years old, but you don't seem to have changed much. Is this not a big change?" Rinpoche touched his face and that shiny bald head. He recalled that he used to be a little fresh meat. Time is really a butcher's knife. Come on, you have changed a lot. Looking at your face, there are no signs of aging. Look at me, even my wrinkles have appeared, Qingqing jokingly scolded. 12 years had passed on Earth, but only 6 years had passed for Rinpoche. What about Jiangnan? Ren Baqin asked with a smile. I'm at home. I still have to accompany my son to do his homework. I'll come over tomorrow morning. This is too realistic. Ren Baqin was speechless. After that, the two of them chatted for a long time and sighed over the years. In fact, most of the time it was Qin Qing who was sighing. On the contrary, Ren Baqin didn't feel much about it. After all, it had only been 6 years. Furthermore, during this period of time, there were many things happening one after another. Dayo's various matters such as the war with Great Xia, the pacification of Tianjing Basin, and the trip to the 60,000 mountains. More importantly, he had just gotten married, unlike Qin Qing whose son was 10 years old. They didn't catch up for a long time and Ren Baqin was talking about. Leukemia drugs had long been on the market. Just like the sobriety medicine, they occupied a large share of the market as soon as they were launched, both domestically and abroad. However, there were already imitations of the hangover medicine, and they were also made with green vines. This was something that could not be avoided. Chen's time and time he and he Chen's, said they. The pharmaceutical. Now, this pharmaceutical factory and laboratory were very famous in the country. The Chen family had also taken advantage of this opportunity to prosper. It could be said that they had made all kinds of connections and had long since left the 3 northeastern provinces. Ren Baqin thought for a while and said, I'll give you some herbs and formulas for you to study. The pharmaceutical factory and laboratory could give him 200 to 300 million yuan in dividends every year, which was his biggest source of income besides the interest-free, indefinite loan. Dayo had a lot of drugs with special effects. Bringing 2 that could be developed on Earth would bring the pharmaceutical factory and laboratory to a higher level. Although they could only provide a source now, they might be of great use in a decade or decades when the influence of the pharmaceutical factory and laboratory was greater. The two of them chatted late into the night, and Xenja was holding a beer mug instead of a juice glass. Her face was flushed and her eyes were glazed over. Ren Baqin had no choice but to bring Xenja back. Any later and he would have to carry her back. She would die. Nothing happened along the way. When they entered the elevator, Xenja, who was blushing, finally asked, Your Highness. Ren Baqin turned to look at her. How did your brain become so bright? Xenja blurted out these words out of her mouth. Ren Baqin was speechless. Can't we chat? Looking at Xenja's inquisitive gaze behind her glasses, Ren Baqin replied, Probably using love to generate electricity. Ren Baqin pondered. Wasn't it for Her Majesty? Otherwise, how could he practice that technique? Otherwise, how could he be so bright? This was all because of his deep love. Xenja's eyes flickered a few times. She suppressed her emotions and asked softly, That? Are we still doing the electric shock experiment? Ren Baqin was taken aback when he heard Xenja's voice and words. Why did she bring this up? Of course. Ren Baqin wanted to say that he definitely wouldn't do it. However, when he saw Xenja's calm gaze, he didn't say that word. Do you like the electric shock experiment? Ren Baqin subconsciously recalled the scenes from that time. It was like watching a movie in slow motion. Xenja thought about it and answered honestly, I'm a little interested. I think it's interesting. That experiment gave me a different feeling, one that I've never felt before. Of course, Ren Baqin knew that it had never happened before, but he really couldn't explain the specifics to Xenja. Besides, Xenja had never come into contact with such things. Of course, there will be more experiments. I'll let you know when the time comes, Ren Baqin said. Okay. Xenja responded. Ren Baqin rubbed his head. He didn't expect that Xenja, who was usually cold and cheerless, was actually a masochist. He drew an equal line with Ning Kaichen. Forget it, it was a pleasure to help others. You don't have to praise me for doing a good deed. The next day was the wedding. Ren Baqin was manipulated like a puppet for a long time before he went to fetch the bride. As soon as he got out of the car, Ren Wanyin came over and asked with a smile, Are you nervous? Ren Baqin gave him a slap on the head. He wasn't nervous, but he felt that it was quite fresh. Even though this was his second marriage, it was still his second. However, he was the one who was fetched the last time. He turned to look behind him. Qin Qing, Ren Wanyin, Ding Jie, and the 10 winged cavalry warriors were all there. He nodded with satisfaction. He was considered strong in this aspect. Go upstairs. When they reached the floor, Ren Baqin knocked on the door, but there was no response. Ren Baqin twisted the doorknob, but it was locked from the inside. I have to open the door first, right? Ren Baqin suddenly laughed. Under normal circumstances, he should have used a red packet to knock on the door, right? However, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were inside, so the red packet was definitely useless. Rinpoche took out a bag from behind his waist and said, "White rabbit creamy candies. Who wants them?" Chapter 863. After Rinpoche shouted, he heard an "ah," followed by another "ah," followed by the sound of bodies colliding. Then there was no more movement. Rinpoche was shocked. Even the white rabbit creamy candy didn't work? Wine chocolate. Who wants it? There was no sound. Rinpoche was finally sure that his ultimate move wasn't going to work today. "What do you want?" Rinpoche shouted at the door. If an ordinary person got married, this place would definitely be used to block red packets. However, the people inside were definitely not playing this game. "Give us a wonderful performance." This voice sounded a little mature and sounded like it was from Jiangnan. Thinking about it, it should be from Jiangnan. Perform what? Crush a rock on the chest? Rinpoche rolled his eyes. This was something he could still try. In fact, an electric drill could also be performed, but he reckoned that no one would dare to watch. "I want to see you drink the water of life without getting drunk." Rinpoche's eyes widened. Water of life? 1,000 cups without getting drunk? Which bastard? You want me to perform 1,000 cups of 96 degrees vodka without getting drunk? Can I still live after drinking it? Judging from the purposeful voice, it was either Qing Yuan or Hong Yuan. It was more likely to be Qing Yuan. Rinpoche took 2 steps back, waved his head at the winged cavalry warriors behind him and said, "Go, tear down the door." The cameraman immediately went numb. Tear down the door? Tear down the door at a wedding? Or were they wrong? After thinking about it carefully, they still felt that they might have misunderstood. No matter what, there was no need to tear down the door on such a joyous occasion. They had never seen a wedding like this. 10 winged cavalry warriors laughed merrily as they blocked the corridor and formed a circle. Old man gang, 2 sounds. In fact, it was rock, paper, scissors, but they called it old gang. Old gang. Old gang. Old gang. Rinpoche's face twitched a few times. 10 people playing rock, paper, scissors together? Were they trying to guess that it would be next year? At this moment, a miracle happened. The 10 men laughed together, and one of the winged cavalry warriors was kicked out of the crowd. "Go." Rinpoche pointed at the new security door in front. "Should I demolish it from the inside or from the outside?" Since the winged cavalry warrior had been kicked out, he was willing to concede defeat and spoke rather heroically. "Outwards." "All right, watch me." That winged cavalry warrior clenched his fists and made a cracking sound. Then he smashed his fists on both sides of the door. Rinpoche felt the entire floor shake. "Ah!" A scream came from the other side of the door. It sounded like someone from Jiangnan. 2 cracks appeared on the walls on both sides of the door. The places where the fist hit had been pierced through, and the figures inside could be seen. The eyes of the cameramen behind them were wide open. Although many people had gained a lot of strength after cultivating the 15th broadcast Qigong, to be able to punch through someone's body with a single punch. Not to mention how much strength was required, was his hand all right? However, what happened next caught them off guard. The security door opened quickly, and a lady stepped forward. She reached out and pressed down on the bald head of the winged cavalry warrior. Bang! The entire floor shook again. The tiles on the floor of the corridor were all cracked open, and half of the winged cavalry warrior's head was pressed in. Bang! The security door was slammed shut again. Only a bunch of people were left staring at each other. Should we call an ambulance? The cameraman's legs and stomachs were trembling. They had never seen such a situation during a wedding reception. How much hatred did they have? Swoosh! The winged cavalry warrior propped himself up with both hands, pulled his head out and shook it, causing his nose to bleed. Rinpoche's head was throbbing. That was Xianjia. Given her character, she definitely wouldn't do such a thing under such circumstances. Needless to say, it must have been the Empress's instructions. Rinpoche looked at the 2 holes on the side of the door. One of them was just enough for him to put his hand in to open the door. They probably wouldn't hit him, right? Rinpoche laughed, put his hand in through the hole and was about to open the door. Then he was slapped on the back of his hand. The sound was loud and clear as if someone had slapped him hard in the face. It's swollen. Rinpoche stood outside the door with a solemn look on his face. It's swollen? Xianjia said from inside. Aya, it's really swollen. This was Qing Yuan's voice. Rinpoche silently withdrew his hand. It was indeed swollen like a hoof. It was a familiar formula and smell. Needless to say, it was the Empress. Brother? Rin Wanyin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He squeezed past Rinpoche and stuffed a thick stack of red packets into his hand. Then a low voice came from inside. Do you want to open the door? It was Jiang Nan's voice. After all, she didn't understand the situation and didn't dare to go overboard. No way. This time it was the Empress's voice and she didn't try to hide it at all. It seemed like using force wouldn't work, and the red packet method wouldn't work either. They still had to use their wits. Tell me, what do you want? Draw a line. Don't mention the water of life. Do you dare to let me drink it? Rinpoche said. We dare. Forget it, let's not talk about the water of life. It's not easy for us to get married and it's not easy for everyone. Let's do something practical. It's already the second time. Cough, that time it was just the two of us and no one else. It was our first marriage, so let's talk properly. Can't we have a chat? Rinpoche coughed dryly. Qin Qing, Ren Wanyin, and the rest of the cameramen were all embarrassed. How could they film the process of picking up the bride for others to see? Now, the wedding planner had already started to suspect that they were here to cause trouble. Rinpoche glared at Qin Qing fiercely. Based on this tormenting method, it must have been Jiang Nan who suggested it first, and then the Empress was moved. Otherwise, the Empress definitely wouldn't know about these messy things. Why don't I sing a wet song for all of you? Rinpoche decided to choose a less difficult one. Bright moonlight in front of the bed, 2 pairs of shoes on the floor, how fitting would that be? Let's rehearse our lines. You have to rehearse everyone's lines. If we are satisfied, open the door, Jiang Nan's voice sounded. Rinpoche glared at Qin Qing again. Jiang Nan should be 35 or 36 years old now. Why didn't she look dignified at all? Okay. Rinpoche's face was full of concentration as he waited to see what kind of tricks they were up to. Shall we begin? Jiang Nan shouted from inside the house. Let's begin. You are here? Rinpoche thought for a while. What did these 3 words mean? Then he probed, I am here. You shouldn't have come. Rinpoche was speechless. Nonsense, if I didn't come, where would I go? However, Rinpoche knew that this was Gulongfeng. Jiang Nan's lines were pretty good. But I'm still here. Since you are here, you have to leave the things behind. Rinpoche turned his head and looked at Qin Qing. His eyes were filled with questions. What things? However, he followed along and said, I can leave the things behind, but I have to bring the person with me. Qin Qing spread his hands. How would I know what things are? Rinpoche, that's your wife. Bring the things over first. Jiang Nan's voice sounded. Rinpoche thought for a while, grabbed a bunch of white rabbit creamy candies and threw them in. Something's not right. Rinpoche took a stack of red packets from Ren Wanyin and stuffed them in. It's still not right. Rinpoche was about to go crazy. God knows what they want. Leave the 6-flavor Rehmannia pills behind. Rinpoche almost vomited blood. Where am I going to get the 6-flavor Rehmannia pills for you? Furthermore, who would bring a box of 6-flavor Rehmannia pills to a wedding? Jiang Nan's laughter could be heard from inside the house. Change the person. Change the person. Let's just say that he is too much. This time it was a voice that was pinching its throat. Orioles, swallows, green, red, everywhere is harmonious and harmonious. Your Highness, you can pass by matching the second half of the couplet. Rinpoche felt that it sounded familiar. He turned his head to look at the people behind him and saw that they were all at a loss. Rinpoche slapped his head. It was fine if he couldn't remember. After all, he was a famous teacher in a mountain village. How could he be stumped by this? He immediately said, flowers, flowers, leaves blooming and falling year after year, day after day, day after night. Qing Yuan stuck out her tongue in the room and exclaimed happily, you passed, you passed. In the movie it was rain, wind, flowers, leaves, leaves, year after year, day after day. The reason why she came up with this couplet was because of the phrase year after year, day after day, day after day. Even though she didn't know any poems or couplets, she knew that even though Rinpoche's answer was slightly different, it was almost the same. As such, she was rather happy. Chapter 864. What happened next was relatively simple. Hung Wan still used the same couplet as Qing Yuan and found one with a good meaning. Xianzhi gave up. Given her character, she couldn't think of anything. Give me a bag of sweets and I'll open the door for you now. Lin Xiaola's voice had just left her mouth when she heard the sound of bodies colliding with each other. Lin Xiaola stopped moving again. It seems that I'm the only one left. I'll be impolite then. A coquettish voice was heard. Although it sounded weird, that voice was enough to make people forget the content of her words. except for Renbaqian. If I say something difficult, Her Majesty will definitely blame me. I've heard people say that sometimes, the ears are more important than the eyes. Many things can be heard with the ears than seen with the eyes, especially those that can't be seen with the eyes. There's a saying called the voice of the heart. What can you hear, Your Highness? Although it was the Empress and the Prince in the room, the others didn't think much about it. Perhaps her nickname was Bai Xia? Someone wants to eat sweets so much that she's going crazy. Renbaqian laughed. The room was filled with laughter again. It's a trick. Why don't you try to guess what the most important person today is thinking? Ning Caichen's coquettish voice was heard again. Cough, cough. Renbaqian pinched his throat and softly imitated the Empress's voice. Why is she so long-winded? I'll behead her when I get back. Your Highness is joking again. However, I'll leave the last question to the most important person today. Ning Caichen chuckled. It was finally the most critical moment. A faint female voice rang out in the room. In this world, everything has a date on it. Sardines expire, can meat expires, and even plastic wrap expires. In this world, what else won't expire? Hearing this voice, Renbaqian could imagine the Empress sitting in her room with a calm face as she said these words indifferently. Renbaqian raised his eyebrows. That's why I hate Wang Jiawei. He always said some pretentious things when he had nothing better to do. However, he still had to deal with it. Renbaqian lowered his voice and said gently, everything will expire, but the memories in your mind won't. We agreed on a lifetime. A day less, a minute less, and a second less doesn't count as a lifetime. The room fell silent. Open the door. The Empress said calmly. Renbaqian could finally heave a sigh of relief. He turned his head to look behind him and saw Qin Qing and Ren Wanyin giving him a thumbs up. The door finally opened. At first glance, he saw a row of 10 winged cavalry warriors standing in the room with sinister smiles on their faces. It was actually a smile, but to the others, it looked like a sinister grin. Renbaqian entered the house and took a glance. Finally, he saw the girl who wanted to eat candy but couldn't. She was lying flat on the ground and looked like a corpse. He reckoned that she had been knocked unconscious. Ning Caichen and Jiang Nan were sitting on the sofa with smiles on their faces. When he reached the inner room, he finally saw the Empress sitting in front of the dressing table. She was wearing a dragon and phoenix gown that was mainly gold and red. It was even more gorgeous than the one she wore in Dayo. Her hair was coiled into a bun at the back of her head and adorned with some gold ornaments. Her skin was fair, her lips were red like fire, and her eyebrows were slightly curved. They were not as straight as before and looked much gentler. She just sat there, pursed her lips and looked at him. Her eyes were as clear and sparkling as a lake. Renbaqian felt that he was probably going to have kidney deficiency again. Well, he was still weak now and would need at least 10 days to recover. What are you thinking about? The Empress couldn't help but ask when she saw Renbaqian standing at the door and looking at her. I'm thinking of doing my best until my last breath. Renbaqian's expression was very serious, his tone was very serious, and so was his content. However, the Empress blushed after hearing it and wanted to spit at him. After receiving the bride, the rest would be easy. They waited in the room for the time to come before going to the bridal chamber and then to the hotel. As for the cameramen, they were staring at each other. At first, it was better outside the door, but once they entered the room, the atmosphere immediately turned cold. The bride and groom were silent and whispered from time to time while the others were in a daze. How were they going to take pictures like this? They wanted to lighten up the atmosphere, but when they saw the 20 scarred men around them, they couldn't say anything. However, this was what they were doing. If they didn't take some shots, how were they going to answer to their superiors? A few of them were sweating profusely. Ahem, shouldn't it be livelier? A man from a wedding plucked up his courage and asked. The 20 winged cavalry warriors immediately turned their eyes to him. They felt that it was more appropriate to use the word head as a measure. We can't take pictures like this. We didn't prepare any wine, so we can't have a good time, one of the winged cavalry warriors said regretfully. Yeah, why didn't you prepare wine? I heard that it was prepared, but it's not here. By the way, Little Bean, I haven't had a drink with you in a long time. One of the winged cavalry warriors looked at Ding Jie, who was smoking a cigar. I'd be a fool to drink with you. Ding Jie looked at them with disdain. This group of mountain kids would play finger-guessing games after drinking, but was that something humans could play? Little Bean, are you looking down on us? The 20 pairs of eyes were like 40 knives stabbing at him. Ding Jie's face darkened. I have something to do later. The 20 of them sneered at the same time, giving him goosebumps. He had a bad feeling about this. Let me tell you, if you don't drink, you are looking down on us. I don't need to tell you what happens to people who look down on us, right? I'll drink. Ding Jia's face immediately turned ashen. When the time was up, everyone set off again for the new residence before heading to the hotel. With 20 winged cavalry warriors standing there, anyone would have to think twice before speaking. Not long after they arrived at the hotel, a bespectacled middle-aged man found Ren Baqian. Congratulations to Mr. Ren and Madam Qi on your wedding. I'm Lu Changqing, and this is Mr. X's congratulatory gift. He didn't say his name, but Ren Baqian knew who he was the moment he said his surname. It was the gentleman who had retired. The congratulatory gift was a framed piece of calligraphy, "Tie the knot, a match made in heaven." The calligraphy was written in flamboyant calligraphy. Ren Baqian felt that it looked better than his own calligraphy, which looked like a chicken's claw. Of course, the most important thing was the sincerity. Although that gentleman had retired, his status wasn't ordinary. In particular, the inscription at the bottom was enough to make the city officials smile at Ren Baqian. Ren Baqian decided to hang this calligraphy at the entrance of his house to ward off evil spirits. Of course, he couldn't hang it at home. Who would see it? He would hang it at the entrance of his house. If that gentleman knew what Ren Baqian was thinking at the moment, he would probably vomit blood. In addition, there's also this. The middle-aged man handed over a red packet with the words, "Double Happiness" written on it. "You're too kind." Ren Baqian immediately laughed. Could it be a gift money? He took it and knew that it was as he had expected. He poured out the contents, and the 3 golden words on the red surface were reflected in Ren Baqian's eyes. Marriage certificate. Ren Baqian almost vomited blood. That gentleman specially asked someone to give him this thing? Sir said that this is a legally protected marriage, Su Qingsang said. The middle-aged man recalled the old man's expression when he handed this thing to him. It was like a mischievous child, and he laughed. Chapter 865. After the old man's men left, there were still more than a dozen waves of gifts. These people were all big shots and were ranked on the wealth list. However, given their status, it wasn't appropriate for them to appear on such occasions, so they sent their men. The first was the pig farm owner, who was the father of Lin Xiaola's good friend's master. "You sent a pig." It was really a pig. Fortunately, it wasn't sent to the hotel and was sent directly to a house along with the house key. Next was another big shot in the IT industry, Boss Ma's man who could become stronger by topping up money. As for the rest, some were in the IT industry, some were in the beverage industry, and some were in the automobile industry. If the names of these people were to be leaked, it would cause a stir in the economic and entertainment media. Ren Baqian naturally knew their purpose. Now that the effects of martial arts had gradually begun to appear, many people, especially the rich, felt a sense of crisis. When an individual's martial arts reached a certain level, especially when the number of individuals with superior strength increased, the expansion of strength would naturally give rise to all kinds of desires. At this time, wealth and status were no longer enough to protect them. Under the circumstances that their own cultivation was slow, they needed good martial arts and bodyguards. Coincidentally, both of these were in Ren Baqian's hands. Putting aside the martial arts manuals, Ren Baqian's martial arts centers now had a total of 6 branches. 2 of them were in the capital, 2 were in Shanghai, the largest one was in Wuxi City, and the last one was in Yang City. These martial arts centers didn't advertise or participate in competitions, but they were quite famous. In particular, they didn't advertise, which made the martial arts centers even more mysterious in the eyes of many people. This fame mainly came from the occasional videos that were secretly filmed and posted online, allowing people to get a glimpse of the tip of the iceberg of this Dayo martial arts center. However, those who had sources of information knew that the real experts were in this martial arts center, in addition to a group of people in the hands of the nation. At present, there were more than 340 inner disciples in the martial arts center, and all of them were at least at the man-wheel level. There were more than 20 core disciples, and all of them had hopes of reaching the earth wheel level in 5 to 10 years. One had to know that Earth didn't have the treasures of the other world. To be able to reach the earth wheel level in such a short period of time was already considered amazing. In the other world, those who cultivated from a young age and reached the earth wheel level before the age of 20 were already quite famous. On the other hand, if one were to attain the earth wheel level within a decade on Earth, he would definitely be a genius among geniuses in that world and would have the hope of advancing to the spirit wheel level in the future. Within 10 years, these core disciples would probably grow into the world's top martial artists. As for those inner disciples, they would also become overlords. Not to mention their future, just their strength alone was enough to make those tycoons drool. Under such circumstances, Rinpoche, the person behind the martial arts center, was much more famous in some circles than he had imagined. Especially after many people tried to recruit disciples from the dojo and failed. This was because all the inner disciples of the dojos knew that the dojos required points to exchange for resources and subsequent cultivation techniques. Assigning missions was one of the most important ways to earn points. Moreover, not only did they not have to pay tuition fees, but the dojo would also give them an allowance. Although it was not enough to make them rich, it was enough for them to have enough food and clothing. Under such circumstances, unless it was a disciple who had encountered an accident, how else could they recruit him? During this period of time, there were also dozens of wild man-will experts in China. After all, the population base was still there, and there was no shortage of geniuses in this world. However, when they were recruiting those practitioners, they would flatly reject them if they met practitioners who had come into contact with the dojos. Even when they had negotiated with those practitioners, they would often be intercepted by the dojos. The reason was very simple: resources. Although they were rich, the dojos had resources that they didn't. One of the most important resources was advanced cultivation techniques, which they couldn't provide no matter how much money they had. How many of those talented and outstanding people were willing to be mediocre and cut off the possibility of advancing further? Therefore, during the initial stages of this revolution, the high-end forces were in the hands of two forces. One was the country and the other was the Dayo dojos. This would be the case for a foreseeable long period of time. Under such circumstances, Rinpoche's name naturally spread far and wide. In particular, the owner of the pig farm hired two experts from Rinpoche as his bodyguards. If it wasn't for the fact that Rinpoche's wedding was relatively low-key and few people heard about it, there would have been many more people who came to send gifts. "Mr. Rin, this is a gift card from our boss." A middle-aged man presented the card with both hands. Rinpoche took it and glanced at it. It was Li XX, a big shot in the IT industry. He gestured to the winged cavalry warrior and said, "Send this person out." The middle-aged man's face suddenly changed. "Mr. Rin? I don't like your boss." "I won't accept this gift," Rinpoche said faintly. "Mr. Rin, our chairman has never seemed to have any unhappiness with you. Besides, our chairman's identity, your boss's identity, has nothing to do with me. It doesn't matter whether we have any unhappiness or not. The key is that I don't like him." Rinpoche sneered. The middle-aged man wanted to speak again, but the winged cavalry warrior grabbed him by the neck like a chicken and dragged him away. This sudden turn of events made everyone's expressions change. The person behind this middle-aged man was also one of the top 20 richest people on the list. They didn't expect Rinpoche to chase him away without even accepting the gift. This made people doubt the truth of the matter. Perhaps that big shot really didn't know when he had offended Rinpoche. However, the person in front of him was too bold. Although everyone was currently interested in befriending him, there was still a huge gap between his status and that person's. With this small prelude, many people secretly paid attention to this corner. The expressions of the remaining people changed a few times. They were really afraid of being thrown out like that person just now. However, the mission still had to be completed. This time, everyone's hearts were in their mouths. Rinpoche accepted the gifts from the first two people with a faint smile and even said, "Thank your boss on my behalf. I will definitely visit him in the future." However, when it came to the third person, Rinpoche directly threw the gift back. "This person, please leave as well." That person's expression suddenly changed. The people who had previously given gifts immediately showed expressions of schadenfreude. "Mr. Rin, can I ask why?" That person wanted to die. "What? I don't like your boss Yang and I don't like your company either." Rinpoche still had a calm look on his face as he spoke. "Mr. Rin, are you serious?" That person couldn't help but ask. Rinpoche revealed a kind smile, but it gave others the impression that he was a giant bear baring its fangs. Everyone else thought that he was lying. After all, no one would offend two famous people in the country just because they didn't like them. Moreover, he directly fell out with them when they gave him gifts. Normal people wouldn't do that. However, Rinpoche was really speaking the truth this time. One of them was a big shot in the IT industry while the other was a big shot in the real estate industry. In particular, the latter family was one of the top 10 richest families in the country. Their status was indeed extraordinary, and their influence was indeed not small. If it were someone else, they naturally wouldn't offend them so easily. However, Rinpoche didn't care. Would they bite him? He only knew two things. Back then he wanted to have his foreskin circumcision. In the end, he was tricked by his previous company into going to a certain private hospital. Let's not talk about the rest. In any case, it was not a good memory. Ever since the latter moved into his hometown, he couldn't afford to buy a house. Of course, that was more than 10 years ago. However, Rinpoche remembered it very clearly. Rinpoche didn't know how much those things had to do with them, and he couldn't be bothered to care. In any case, he just hated them. As for this being a wedding, a joyous occasion. Sorry, this was a second marriage, or rather, a performance. Chapter 866. Bang. Along with the shattering of the glass, an angry voice said, "He's too much. I had the intention to befriend him, but he chased me away?" An old man stood up from his chair and spun around, still feeling resentful. A middle-aged man in his 40s sat on the sofa and asked, "Do you have any grudges with him?" "What grudges could I have with him? That's strange. However, this matter is indeed a little too much," the middle-aged man said thoughtfully. In any case, the old man was one of the top tycoons in China, and he had taken the initiative to express his goodwill. He didn't expect to be chased out before he could even deliver his gift. This was simply the worst form of humiliation. "What should we do next?" the middle-aged man asked again. The old man smashed another piece of porcelain before sitting on the table and thinking seriously. "Block all information about his martial arts center." "Is this appropriate? Since he has already expressed his hostility, what's the use of tolerating him? However, this won't affect him much." The old man frowned. That person had a deep relationship with the nation and couldn't be offended. Furthermore, he had a large number of experts under him. Putting everything else aside, the other party was a master himself, and he was still carrying a wanted order from the US. Anyone who knew about what he had done back then would be terrified. "Forget it, there's no need to block information. It would make me look petty. Let him be." The old man waved his hand. Flowers didn't bloom for 100 days, and people didn't have 1,000 days of happiness. He would find a suitable opportunity in the future to settle this score with him. "Increase your efforts to find those experts among the common people." "We will do this." In another location, a few men and women were using a video call to say similar things. The wedding was yesterday. Rinpoche had changed the wedding process at that time. There wasn't anything that made the empress uncomfortable, and everything that followed went very smoothly. Only when it came to serving tea did the empress behave cautiously like an ordinary girl in front of her parents-in-law. The situation was almost reversed. It couldn't be helped since the empress's aura wasn't something that ordinary people could withstand. People in high positions wouldn't look like ordinary people even if they changed into ordinary clothes. Moreover, the empress was one of the few experts in the world. How many people in Dayo would gladly accept the offer of tea? Fortunately, it was completed smoothly and could be considered an explanation to his parents. At this moment, Rinpoche was leaning against the railing on the second floor. This was a duplex house. The area was not big, about 300 square meters. After entering the door, there was a 6-meter-tall living room that was connected from top to bottom and looked unusually bright. On one side of the living room was a row of windows from top to bottom, allowing the sun to shine in unscrupulously. The room was decorated in a simple European style. Many elderly people like this kind of clean and tidy style with white and warm colors. "Get someone to contact a hospital in Thailand and get the best doctors to perform the surgery," Rinpoche said faintly as he leaned against the fence. "What kind of surgery?" Rinwanyin was slightly puzzled. Wasn't China better than Thailand in this aspect? Sex change surgery. After Rinpoche finished speaking, Rinwanyin looked at him in horror. It was not that he knew how to perform surgery, but he did not know who he was going to perform this kind of surgery on. This was simply too ruthless. "Were you the devil?" "There, that's him." Rinpoche raised his chin slightly. "You've met her before, Ning Kaichen. She wants to become a man?" Rinwanyin's tone was a little strange and full of regret. He had seen Ning Kaichen a few times over the past 2 days, and this misty and charming woman had left a deep impression on him. After knowing that there was really nothing going on between her and his brother, he had some small calculations in his mind. After hearing Rinpoche's words, he felt a little regretful that such a beautiful and bewitching woman was actually gay. It was such a pity. However, being gay wasn't unacceptable. If he married her and she brought back a girlfriend to occupy his home, he would naturally be angry. However, as time went on, both of them were pregnant with his child. It wasn't impossible for him to take over. He wants to become a woman. Rinpoche smirked. Rinwanyin was confused. What did you say, brother?" Rinpoche crossed his arms and smiled. He wants to become a woman. Ren Wanyin pointed at Ning Kaichen below with a puzzled look. Rinpoche nodded gently and said, yes, he's a man. In the future, Ning Kaichen would be stationed on Earth, and Ren Wanyin and Ding Jia would often deal with him. Rinpoche had a headache dealing with Ning Kaichen's seductive charm. Now that he was still a man, many people were moved. If he really became a woman, it would be quite a scary thing to think about. Just in case, Rinpoche let his younger brother handle this matter. After knowing Ning Kaichen's true colors, Ren Wanyin shouldn't have any other ideas. Ren Wanyin opened his mouth and felt that he was about to lose the ability to speak. The woman below, who was exuding a seductive aura, was actually a man? It was simply unbelievable. Rinpoche called Ning Kaichen over and pointed to Ren Wanyin beside him. He will find you the best doctor and help you become a real woman. Then I shall thank you in advance. Ning Kaichen pursed her lips and smiled. Her eyes shone, causing Ren Wanyin's heartbeat to accelerate by 50%. However, when he thought that the other party was a man, he felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. After letting Ren Wanyin leave, Rinpoche said to Ning Kaichen, after a few days, you should have realized that this is a completely different world from Dayo, Great Xia, and the Yun Nation. I didn't expect such a magical thing to exist in this world. Ning Kaichen sighed. If she hadn't been brought here by Rinpoche, how could she have known that there was such a world and that Rinpoche actually came from here? She wouldn't have even dreamed of it. It's indeed magical, Rinpoche said softly. Up until now, he still didn't know how he got to that world. Even the Empress couldn't figure it out. She only knew that the space around her fluctuated, and she was able to travel to another world. However, she still had no clue what caused it and how it was done. After you become a woman, you will rest for a period of time. Wanyin will arrange a place for you to stay. You should also use this time to understand more about this world. I will have a mission for you later. Your Highness, aren't you afraid that I will run away? Ning Kaichen smiled. Where can you run to in such a big world? Rinpoche didn't care at all. As long as it was in this world, there was no one who couldn't be killed. Not to mention the Empress, just Lin Xiaola alone was unstoppable. Besides, no one except him could take out the materials for the sword nurturing pool. He wasn't worried at all. Such a big world. Ning Kaichen chewed on these words and then exclaimed, Your Highness is so bold. Rinpoche waved his hand and said, This world is very big but also very small. You will know after staying here for a while. What does Your Highness want me to do? There's no harm in telling you first. Investigate and capture some people and then hand them over to me, Rinpoche said. It won't be difficult for you. However, you have to remember that there are legal constraints in this world. The constraints and control are much stronger than in Great Xia, so you have to be careful. I understand. Ning Kaichen nodded. He didn't mind this kind of thing. Rinpoche felt a little relieved. He had finally taken this step. After Ning Kaichen understood this world, the next thing to do was to find some suitable scholars and then kidnap them to Dayo. Chapter 867. Kidnapping scholars was a long-term plan and also a means to analyze this world. The academy was the foundation. After the lantern-grabbing contest on the 15th day of the first lunar month, the academy officially reopened. You did a good job last time. Rinpoche patted Lin Mengxing on the shoulder and smiled. Dayo now had the Aboriginals, the Jing tribe, and the people of the Yun Nation. All of them had to act according to the law, which was what Rinpoche wanted to achieve. At the very least, he couldn't let Dayo have a situation where the Aboriginals were superior while the Jing tribe and the people of the Yun Nation were inferior. Whether it was the enactment or implementation of the law, this had to be shown. However, Rinpoche also knew that this would take time. After all, the Aboriginals had the biggest fists, and the entire imperial court was ruled by the Aboriginals. It was impossible to make everyone equal immediately. Just like this time, even if Hong Bao killed that kid, he wouldn't receive much punishment. The punishment was because he didn't act in accordance with the Empress's decree, not because he killed the son of the warlord at will. If the son of the warlord was like this, there was no need to mention the ordinary people. Therefore, not only must the people and officials be restrained by the law, but they also had to support the other two races and give them a certain amount of power to speak. This way, a more balanced situation could be formed. Yes, balanced. Thank you for your praise, Your Highness, Lin Mengxing responded with a smile. How are you doing in language and mathematics? Rinpoche asked again. I've mastered the basics of language. As for mathematics, I've studied the calculation classics of Xia Court, and many places are recorded in it. I've learned a lot by comparing the two. For this batch of new students, you will be teaching these two subjects, Rinpoche said. It was the day of another batch of new students. This was the fourth batch of students at the academy. In fact, only the first batch of students was taught by Rinpoche from beginning to end. The second half of the second batch was taught by the robots and senior students. As for the third batch, Rinpoche only taught for 2 months after returning from the 60,000 mountains. Next, Rinpoche would focus on the second and third batches of students. As for the new batch, there were 2 classes and 100 students. Lin Mingxing, the senior students, and the robots would be in charge. This batch of students included his chief disciple, Zhang Kaixian, as well as 14 other youngsters from the Jing tribe. The rest of the students were the children of low-level officials, and the rest were commoners. I will definitely do my best, Lin Mingxing immediately said with a straight face. Rinpoche nodded. After explaining some things to Lin Mingxing, he left him there to wait for the new students while he returned to his office. In this half a month, the academy underwent some changes again. The main thing was that all the thresholds had been removed, and the ground had been leveled with cement, which was more suitable for the robot to walk on. This time Rinpoche brought back 8 new robots. All of them were equipped with new internal sensors, external information sensors, chips, and programs that were more advanced than those from a few years ago. This batch of robots had simple memories. They could remember a person's face and name, and they could talk to people. Through pre-programmed settings, they could show different emotions according to different situations, and they even had different personalities. Of course, the most important thing was his teaching ability, which had improved a lot compared to before. From now on, these 8 robots would be an important part of the academy. Their different personalities would make them different people, and they would teach different lessons to the students. After the students arrived, Rinpoche first gathered them in a large lecture hall that could accommodate hundreds of people and gave a speech. After that, he gave a test to the second batch of students. 2 days later, Rinpoche held a test paper with an uncertain expression on his face. This was a single-digit test paper. Although the score was only in the single digits, Rinpoche had to admit that this student was very imaginative. For example, one of the math questions asked how to divide 3 fruits among 7 children. Then, he drew 4 knives and chopped 4 of the children to death, leaving only 3 children to divide the 3 fruits. He was really a genius. Perfect. Very perfect. Rinpoche looked up at the girl in front of him. She was Zhu Hua, a pretty and wild girl. Rinpoche had a very deep impression of her. She had fought with Qing Lian and Tong Lan less than 2 days after entering the academy. She also participated in the lantern-grabbing contest 2 days ago and was in the limelight. She was a typical girl with only muscles and no brains. Zhu Hua was originally a little nervous as she stood there. When she heard Rinpoche say that it was perfect, she immediately became excited and said, "Is it really perfect? I didn't expect it either. I just casually wrote it down." Rinpoche put on a fake smile and said, "It's already very perfect. However, I have some unfortunate news to tell you. You will be studying with the next batch of students this semester." "What do you mean?" "What? To put it simply, you will be repeating a year." "As for why? The highest score in the 4 subjects is 9 and you ask me why? Is your IQ 9 as well?" Rinpoche snorted. He didn't expect Zhu Hua to ask hesitantly, "Is an IQ of 9 high or low?" Rinpoche was so angry that he almost laughed. The IQ of a normal person is between 90 and 110. Zhu Hua scratched her hair, messing up her originally neat ponytail. "Principal Rin, I know I'm not smart, but I'm not that bad, right? In addition, can I not study with the next batch of students? My younger brother is older than me. I'm officially informing you that you will be repeating a year. Not to mention that your younger brother is older than you, you won't even be able to graduate at this rate. Go back. From tomorrow onwards, you will be studying with the next batch of students." Rinpoche waved his hand and chased the distressed Zhu Hua away. Then he sighed. He really didn't manage this batch of students well enough. Their results were much worse than the first batch and most of them failed. Of course, the most outstanding one was still this 9. However, this also had something to do with the fact that he had been away from the 60,000 mountains for more than a year. It wasn't just the second batch but also the third batch. He would put more effort into them in the future. If a small tree wasn't trimmed, it wouldn't grow straight. In the future he would let them know what learning was. He would give them at least 1 set of questions a day to let them know what it meant to be a 3-year simulation for the 5-year high school entrance exam. Papermaking wasn't difficult and Rinpoche had already created it long ago. However, the demand was small, so he hadn't expanded the production. After that day, Rinpoche ordered the production to be expanded. Similarly, movable type printing was not a difficult thing to do. It only took a week to complete. They even specially built a small printing plant outside the city to be responsible for printing test papers and some books at the same time. A week later, every day the students would see stacks of test papers being sent to the school and distributed to everyone. For a time, the faces of the second and third batches of students changed when they talked about the questions. When the fourth batch of students saw the treatment of the previous two batches of students, they shivered and started to worry about their future. While gloating, the first batch of students also began to revise spontaneously. This was because Rinpoche had already set his sights on them. Chapter 868. Rinpoche hurried back to the palace and saw that the Empress was drinking again. He couldn't help but say, "Your Majesty, you have another child in your belly. Drinking doesn't affect you, but it does affect the child." The Empress replied faintly, but she had no intention of putting down the wine glass in her hand. Rinpoche was furious. After all, that was his son. Rinpoche rushed forward. Rinpoche made his move. Rinpoche snatched the Empress's wine glass. Rinpoche typed "Gigi." "Hey, Your Majesty, it hurts." Rinpoche's face twitched in pain. "Your Majesty, when did you learn to pull my ear?" "Ha." The Empress sneered. Rinpoche was furious. "I want to fight you one-on-one." The Empress rolled her eyes and said with a faint smile, "Come on." Her voice was full of encouragement. Rinpoche said, "Wait until my waist recovers." One-on-one. Rinpoche was furious again. This was something that no man could tolerate. Even if he had to exhaust himself and grind an iron rod into a needle, he would fight it out with her. Forget it." The Water Empress stretched lazily and said indifferently, "I see that you have been quite busy recently, so I'll let you off." Rinpoche snorted. He had indeed been quite busy recently. Each trip would take up to 3 to 5 days, which was too much of a hindrance. Furthermore, his waist hurt. "Also, I'm afraid that your waist will break." The Empress provoked again. Rinpoche's face darkened. "One-on-one. Come on then." The Empress wrinkled her nose slightly, leaned back on the sofa and looked at him sideways. She even hooked her finger at him. "Forget it, I've been quite busy recently. The bookstore and department store are opening for business tomorrow." Rinpoche felt that it would be better to take a step back and bear with it for a while. Let her be strong, let her be. The Empress smirked. However, she knew that Rinpoche had been busy with some matters for the past 2 months and hadn't left the ground all day, so she let him off. The next day, 2 brand new stores opened next to the Imperial Spice Store and the Imperial Glass Store. One of them was the Imperial Department Store. There were many kinds of goods inside, but the store was still empty. The shelves were almost all the same. The goods included toothbrushes, toothpaste, soap, toilet paper, sanitary napkins, clocks, needles, thread, perfume, sunglasses, mirabilite, and a type of flour. This flour was a type of coarse grain flour from Tianjin Basin real estate. Although it could be eaten, it was more useful for tanning furs together with mirabilite. The toothbrush was made from beast hair, while the toothpaste was made from calcium carbonate and glycerin, a byproduct of soap production. The rest of the toilet paper, clocks, needles, and thread were common things in modern times, but they were worth a fortune in this world. The price of the iron needles was almost the same as silver of the same volume. However, compared to the iron needles of the Yun Nation in Great Xia, the price was at least 50% cheaper. It was the same for toilet paper. Although the price was already very low, it was still a luxury for the ordinary people of this world. Even though Rinpoche had positioned this department store as a grocery store at this time, only the officials could afford it. Next to the department store was the Imperial Bookstore. Compared to the department store that was packed with people as soon as it opened, there were very few customers in the Imperial Bookstore, which was also quite large. Lin Mingxing walked into the bookstore and looked around. It was somewhat similar to the library in the academy. One part of the bookstore was filled with bookshelves, while the other part was filled with tables and chairs for people to read books. Next to the tables and chairs were windows made of floor-to-ceiling glass. Bright sunlight was shining in from the outside, and it would be a good feeling to read a book while sitting by the window. The shop assistant was from the Jing tribe, and he was slightly at a loss when he saw Lin Mingxing. Although he had gone through a few days of training, books were precious items that most people couldn't come into contact with. Those who could come here to buy and read books were also of high status. Although the person in front of him was from the Yun Nation, there were very few of them in Lan City. He immediately thought of a teacher from the Black Bamboo Academy. This was because there was a student from the Black Bamboo Academy next door, and he had heard about him before. Although the other party's status wasn't high, he was always in awe of knowledgeable people, which was a common problem among ordinary people in this era. "Don't worry about me, I'm just looking around." Lin Mingxing seemed to have noticed the awkwardness of the shop assistant and smiled. It had to be said that Lin Mingxing was very amiable, and his faint smile made the shop assistant relax a little. "Can we read books here?" Lin Mingxing asked as he pointed to the tables and chairs by the window. There were bookstores in the Yin Nation, but they didn't have these things. The owner of any bookstore wouldn't welcome people who only read books but didn't buy them. "Yes, as long as the books aren't dirted or damaged, all customers can sit here and read," the shop assistant said nervously. "If the sun is too strong, there are bamboo curtains that can be pulled down to block the sunlight." Lin Mingxing nodded and then wandered around the bookshelves in the bookstore. Bilingual Comparison Dictionary, Bilingual 3-Character Classic, Bilingual Elementary Mathematics, Bilingual Xia Court Computational Classics, 3 years of simulation exercises, Learning Simplified Chinese Characters from Pictures, Bilingual Jin Ping Mei. There were about a dozen types of books, some of which were bilingual, and some that weren't labeled were all simplified Chinese characters that he had learned. He randomly picked out a book called The Secret Book of Six Heads and flipped through it. He found that the opening chapter introduced a sect called the Six-Head Sect. Most of the records in the book were herbs and ferocious beasts. There were also some methods to raise and control the ferocious beasts. Lin Mingxing was slightly surprised. He didn't expect such a book to appear in this bookstore. He took the Secret Book of Six Heads and found a long chair to sit on. Lin Mingxing closed the book and slowly pondered. Books weren't cheap in the Yin Nation. However, they could be flipped through at will here, and it wouldn't be a problem to just look at them without buying them. The purpose of Her Highness was to let everyone read and learn, be it high officials or nobles, merchants or peddlers or even the aborigines. Her Highness's goal was to develop the wisdom of the people. The ancients had a saying, "The people can't be made aware of, but they can seek for a reason." This is the power of flexibility and deification. This meant that the superior could guide the people. Sometimes, the people could only follow his guidance and not fully understand the intentions of his guidance. Reading had always been the job of scholars. The people only needed to know what to do. If they had their own ideas, they would cause trouble. There were many people who had this kind of thinking. However, Her Highness wanted to break this rule. If the people were to read and have their own ideas, would that be good or bad? Ren Baqin looked at the report in his hand and rubbed his eyebrows. After the department store opened for a few days, the fastest-selling items were sunglasses and toothpaste. Sunglasses were easy to understand. After all the ministers of the 6 ministries wore a pair of sunglasses and walked around wearing them every day. The others had been coveting them for a long time. The toothpaste sold faster than the sunglasses. The feedback was that it tasted good. Did these guys eat toothpaste as a snack? Ren Baqin put down the report, picked up another one and began to frown. He couldn't recruit any workers. Over the past 2 months he had built a lot of new factories and recruited a lot of workers. However, the population of Lan City wasn't large, and there were even fewer idlers. The latest recruitment notice had been out for 3 days, and only 6 people had been recruited. Chapter 869. Ren Baqin's vision blurred, and he returned from the palace to that villa in Shanghai. The noise from the winged cavalry warriors downstairs never seemed to change. No matter when they came back, they were always in this state. Sometimes Ren Baqin was quite envious of them. After eating, they slept, woke up, ate, beat people up, ate again, drank again, beat people up and slept again. What a happy life. Eat, sleep and beat Dowdo. He rubbed his old waist, changed his clothes and took a shower before calling Ren Wanyan. "How is Ning Kaichen doing?" "Very well, I'll be back in a week or 2. The specifics will depend on the final examination." Sex reassignment surgery wasn't a single surgery, but a series of surgeries, adjustments and recovery. It took much longer than Ren Baqin had expected. It had been half a year since she had been sent there, and she had finally heard some good news. From now on, Ning Kaichen was dead and there was only Ning Kaichen left. "Not bad." Ren Baqin nodded. "What happened to the girl you mentioned the other day?" At the mention of this, Ren Wanyan became excited. A great success. Even though he was on the other end of the phone, Ren Baqin could imagine his excited expression as he danced with joy. "Go online and take a look. The whole world has been shaken by us." Ren Wanyan laughed loudly. Ren Baqin turned on his very old computer, casually opened a web portal, and saw a report about that thing. An epic-making product. Ren Baqian had previously obtained the mind control technology from the nation and handed it over to Ren Wanyin. It had been more than 3 years on Earth. At first, Ren Wanyin only wanted to make the first epic-making game. He recruited various people to set up the New World Software Company. However, as time progressed, their ideas and ambitions grew. Not only did they want to make an epic-making game, but they also wanted to create a second world for mankind. In this period where the emergence of martial arts had caused changes in society, this product had a great effect on alleviating the pressure on the government. It allowed many energetic people to put their excess energy into the game, so the country strongly supported it. Because of this, the game that was originally planned to be released in 2 years had yet to be completed after more than 3 years. Although this project was a bottomless pit that burned money, Ren Baqian didn't mind. After all, he was different from others. He had the great interest-free loan method. Putting aside his connections, it would be easy to get a loan for this world-changing project. However, it was also a waste to keep this technology in their hands and never see the light of day. At the same time, some domestic and foreign companies and media also found out some news, which increased the pressure on this young company. At this time, someone proposed a new idea. It was to use this technology to create another game or virtual experience. It allowed people to experience all kinds of products on the e-commerce platform without leaving their homes. They could experience the pros and cons of each product before making a purchase. Mind control technology not only included the transmission of brainwaves, but also the reception and feedback. A head-mounted device could allow people to directly experience the vast sea of products on the internet, and they could also get a more realistic feeling. For example, the effect of clothes and shoes on the back, whether they were comfortable, and even simulated the environment to get the effects of some common environments such as windproof, waterproof, warm, and so on. Think about it. If a northerner bought a pair of winter boots, but the boots were designed for the southern weather, they would freeze within 2 minutes of wearing them. This situation would never happen again. Some products used all kinds of data to illustrate how good the product was, only to find that it fell far short of expectations after getting it. This situation would also never happen again. For example, the size of the product was too big or too small. Nowadays, most people bought products through the internet. They only saw the product in pictures and then bought it. There were too many unsatisfactory situations. However, this product from New World Software could change the situation. Ren Wanyin and the company's staff spent a year on it. They worked with e-commerce platforms and some e-commerce companies to collect all kinds of data. This time, they launched the results, which included the products of hundreds of businesses. It was named Life. The name was very low, but once it was launched, it shocked the whole world. There were all kinds of praises on the internet. It was conceivable that the sales of the businesses that had previously worked with them would increase significantly. Those who had previously refused to provide data and products would probably regret it now. In the future, anyone who wanted to buy a product would mostly use this simulation software to experience the product before deciding whether to buy it or not. Products without data in this simulation software would definitely receive a cold reception in the market. It would even reach the point where when new products were launched in the future, they would take the initiative to ask New World Software to input data into it. This would also be the source of huge profits in the future. Not to mention, this product had huge potential to be expanded in the future. For example, housing design, renovation design, clothing design, and new product development. There were too many functions that could be expanded into it. It could be said that with this product alone, New World Software had become one of the most eye-catching companies in the whole world. What attracted more attention was that through this simulation software and the virtual control helmet, the whole world was guessing how far virtual games and products in the virtual world were from them. Technically, it was completely achievable. It could even be said that Life was a virtual world with limited functions. Ren Baqian was satisfied after browsing the information on the internet. He had to admit that this was the right way to work with e-commerce companies. According to Wanyin, the employee who made this suggestion was a woman. The reason was that she had received a delivery the day before. After trying it on, she found it extremely ugly, so she came up with this idea. Ren Baqian also saw the photos sent by Wanyin on his phone. He actually wanted to say that this really wasn't the responsibility of the other party's product. After thinking for a moment, Ren Baqian connected to Ren Wanyin again and asked, "When you make games, do you need various mechanical principles and motion feedback? Have you considered making a virtual arena? There is an arena in the game we designed. In another year, the game will be available," Ren Wanyin said subconsciously. Not that kind, but a completely realistic one. A character will be created according to everyone's physical condition in reality and fight with others in the arena. Rinpoche voiced his thoughts. With the popularization of the body-nourishing technique, more and more ordinary people will have all kinds of conflicts because of their gradually increasing strength. Some of the conflicts are due to the expansion of their strength after mastering it. Another reason is that they don't know where they stand and can't understand the strength they have. Nowadays, in order to ensure social order, the country will definitely crack down on violence. However, it's better to let it go than to stop it. There must be a place where they can measure their strength. A place where they can compete with others, train, and vent their anger without getting hurt will definitely have a good market. Moreover, through the changes in everyone's data, it will be easier to find those talented practitioners who have been overlooked for various reasons. But in that case, the martial arts centers in Wuxia City? Ren Wanyan's thoughts were opened by these words, and the first thing he thought of was whether the martial arts centers in Wuxia City would be affected. There will only be benefits and no disadvantages. After all, virtual reality is virtual reality, and reality is reality, Rinpoche said faintly. Moreover, we can also use this platform to host fighting competitions all over the world and make it a global competition. I understand now. I'll make the arrangements and get people to prepare. Ren Wanyan began to get excited. Well, while you're at it, arrange for the move. It's time to move to Wuxia City, Rinpoche said. Now that the construction of Wuxia City had been completed and was gradually starting to prosper, it was a more suitable place than Shanghai. After all, it would be his base camp. He could arrange for a large number of experts to move there. After making all the arrangements, Rinpoche sat in a chair and spaced out for a while. Suddenly, he heard the noise of the winged cavalry warriors downstairs. Chapter 870. I personally felt sorry for the fate of this character. A girl who didn't do anything wrong shouldn't have such a future. However, a novel is a novel and a personal opinion is a personal opinion. In fact, I already had an idea about the future of this character, but after thinking about it carefully, I couldn't make up my mind about the ending of this character. First of all, forget about the motorcycle gang. The Empress is my biological daughter. Now there were three choices. First, accept her. She definitely wouldn't have a public identity and wouldn't let the Empress know. Her identity wasn't very glorious, and her future wasn't very bright either. However, it was relatively a better choice. At least there would be someone watching her until she grew old, and she would also have children. At least she wouldn't have nothing. Second, commit suicide. For such a character, committing suicide might be a good ending. However, the Empress would definitely be affected. This character was the Empress of Earth. Third, be killed by the Empress. The Empress would break through. The Empress is pregnant, and the consequences of this choice are unknown. I haven't thought about it yet. Fourth, grow. Give this character room to grow. According to a hidden setting in this book, the fate of the same person in all parallel worlds would have a maximum value. If the fate of the person in one world was high, the fate of the person in another world would be low. If both the Empress and Qi Jiayu had high fate, the fate of the person in the other world would be very low. Of course, this didn't matter as the person in the other world wouldn't appear. However, in the later stages when she grew up, both the Empress and Rinpoche would be affected. Alright, let the readers vote for these four choices. You can leave a comment at the bottom of this chapter, or you can like the votes of others. There won't be any plot involving her in these 2 days. I will decide her future based on the results of the votes. By the way, many people think that the protagonist and the author are similar in many aspects. Many people think that Rinpoche's worldview is my worldview, but most of the time it isn't. Don't forget that the protagonist of my previous book was the abbot. His personality and worldview were completely opposite from Rinpoche's from the beginning to the end. I like to let the style of the protagonist change according to his personality and experiences. I can't rule out some of the details, but in general it's like this. Personally, I prefer this. Chapter 871. Chao Rong jogged on the sidewalk of Wuxia City, sweating while admiring the scenery on both sides of the road. Even though he had been here for a week, the excitement in his heart hadn't diminished at all. Chao Rong was born in a small town in the northeast and later enrolled in the police academy. Due to his excellent physical fitness and mind, he was among the best in the academy. After graduation, he directly entered the criminal police detachment in his hometown. If it wasn't for a person, it wouldn't have been impossible for him to enter the criminal police force given his circumstances. After returning to his hometown, his career in the brigade was smooth sailing. He solved several major cases in succession, earned 2 first-class merits and 3 second-class merits. At the age of 30, he was promoted to the position of deputy brigade leader. At the same time, he turned his childhood sweetheart into his wife. It could be said that he was proud of his life. If he continued like this, he should be able to become a brigade leader within 10 years. Whether he could advance further after that would depend on luck and opportunity. However, such achievements were already something to be proud of for a young man from an ordinary family. However, 4 years ago he was selected to undergo training in the province, which changed everything. At first, he didn't pay much attention to that training. However, after he went there, he realized that it was different from the past. Cultivation method number 327 was something he had obtained during that training session. A year later, the country began to implement the 15th set of fitness qigong. The era of national cultivation had officially begun. Thanks to his outstanding physique and innate talent, he used 4 years to cross the boundary that had stopped countless people, and reached the strength of the lower mystic stage. At this point he realized that this level of strength had another name, man-will level. Heaven, earth, black and yellow were the current classifications. For ordinary people, as long as they had the data of a healthy adult man, they would be considered to be at the yellow level. The next level was the black level. Having reached the black level, he was very clear about his own strength. In the city he could deal with at least 3 or 4 of his previous selves with guns. He had inquired about how powerful the earth level was, but he had never heard of anyone reaching this level. He wondered if there were any earth level experts in this world. If someone who had just reached the black level could already have such strength, wouldn't those earth level experts be inhuman? After reaching the black level, there were 2 paths in front of him. The first was to enter the Armed Forces Command, which was under preparation, and directly become the Deputy Bureau Chief. The other path was to enter a new department, the Armed Forces Command, and move to Wuxia City. After a brief consideration, he chose the second option. This was not only because he had spent most of his time cultivating after becoming a member of the Armed Forces Command, but also because of the extremely mysterious Wuxia City that was only known to ordinary people. When he brought his wife and 5-year-old son here a week ago, he immediately knew he had made the right choice. Wuxia City was a city where everything was in order, yet there was something strange about it. Monks, Taoist priests, martial artists dressed in traditional Han clothing or other ancient costumes, military elites and members of the Armed Forces Command like himself were everywhere in the city. At the same time, he also heard another name of the city from these people, Central City. Just like the political center of the imperial capital and the economic center of the demonic city, this city would be the center of the martial artists in the future. Moreover, unlike the other 2 cities, this city would be the center of the entire world's martial artists. Only those who had reached a certain standard of strength could bring their family members in, and they would be allocated a house of 140 square meters. Ordinary people, other than the carefully selected staff and government personnel, could not become a member of this city, regardless of whether they were rich or powerful. Just this point alone was enough to make him identify with this city. Even though he had become the director of the Armed Forces Command, he was still limited to the common people of a small city. However, it was completely different here. The people around him were all people like him, the most outstanding people in the whole of China. In the future, this would be the center of the entire world. At the very least, among the people he knew, including his elementary school classmates, colleagues, and other elites he met during the training at the criminal police force, he was the only one who had come here. He was already in a different world from them. Although the current population here was only tens of thousands of people, and the entire city still seemed empty, this situation would change year by year. He believed that it would be completely different in 10 years' time. Chao Rong thought about this as he jogged. At the same time, he would greet the people he met along the way. After turning a corner, he arrived at a main road. This was Zone C, which was very close to the center of Wuxia City. According to some people, this was within the second ring road. Going further in, apart from various government agencies, military departments, plazas, stadiums, hospitals, bustling commercial areas and hotel areas, there were almost no residential areas. The reason why he said almost no residential areas was because there was a peculiar place on the opposite side of the road to his left. Along the road was a row of high-rise buildings that had not yet been put into use, including hotels, shopping malls, supermarkets, cinemas, and a Yao dojo. Behind these high-rise buildings was a commercial street, a park, an arena, and a villa area. The reason why he said this place was peculiar was that although there were very few people in Wuxia City, almost all the areas near the third ring road had been put into use. Only this stretch of buildings was located in Zone C. Although there were occasionally people taking care of them, they had never been put into use. Later, he heard a rumor that this area was privately owned. This news left him speechless. Who could own such a large area in Wuxia City? He had deliberately run one round, and this area was not small. It was a full 5 square kilometers. This was Wuxia City, not some small city. How could someone own such a large private area? He had also specially inquired with his colleagues in the Armed Forces Command and concluded that this area was indeed privately owned. He was not the only one curious. Almost everyone was curious as to who could own such an area in Wuxia City. However, no one knew who it was. However, there were rumors that the person was the boss of the Yao Dojo. After everyone started practicing, he had heard about this dojo when he looked up information on the internet and watched a few videos. What surprised him the most was that there were many man-will experts in the videos. At that time, he only felt that the strength displayed by the other party was terrifying. After all, amateurs enjoyed the show, while experts recognized the artistry. Even though he was not very strong at that time, he could tell that it was extraordinary. It was not until he entered the man-will level 2 years later that he realized what the things in the videos represented. However, after he arrived here and inquired about the area in Zone C, he heard an even more shocking rumor that there was an Earth-level expert in the Yao Dojo. This news shocked him. As far as he knew, the #1 expert in the Armed Forces Command was only at the upper level of the Black level. It was said that he was a martial arts expert before and had entered the Black level 7 years ago. Now he was only at the upper level of the Black level. The upper, middle, and lower levels of the Heaven, Earth, and Black levels correspond to the upper, middle, and lower levels of the Spirit Wheel, Earth Wheel, and Man Wheel levels. The authenticity of this news was unknown, but if it was true, it would be too shocking. Even the Armed Forces Command did not have an Earth-level expert, but one of them actually appeared in a dojo. This also made him even more curious about the identity of the owner of this dojo. Chao Rong, who was running, suddenly felt a little strange. There seemed to be more people on this road today. Although it was within the second ring road, there were usually not many people on this road. There were only a dozen people within 100 meters. Chapter 872. Then he noticed that there were some people standing under the largest building across the road. However, he didn't see them because they were blocked by the trees on both sides of the road. Someone important is coming. Chao Rong immediately reacted. Could it be the owner of that area? Such a large number of people definitely can't be an ordinary person. Even if they aren't the owner of that area, they must be high-ranking personnel. Are these people on this side of the road guards? Chao Rong observed for a while and immediately dispelled this idea. This was because the people on this side of the road weren't vigilant and seemed to be observing the people on the opposite building. Furthermore, these people were monks and Taoist priests. If they were guards, they definitely wouldn't choose an image that was so easily noticed. The monks and Taoist priests in Wuxia City were different from those in other places. All of them were at the man-will level. Before the emergence of martial arts, these people were mostly experts in some sections. After the emergence of martial arts, they took advantage of the opportunity to break through to the man-will level. Although they were all at the man-will level, Chao Rong was very clear that these people were much stronger than him. However, if I have a gun in my hand, they won't be a match for me. Chao Rong thought to himself as he gradually stopped in his tracks. That is. Chao Rong suddenly stopped in his tracks. In front of him, a man in his 40s was standing there with his hands in his pockets, looking at the opposite side of the road. If he remembered correctly, this man was one of the top experts in the Armed Forces Command. Although Chao Rong hadn't been here for a long time, he happened to meet him. Later, he learned from the people next to him that this man was one of the top experts in the Armed Forces Command. Chao Rong didn't expect him to be here. So many people were waiting here just to see this person? Who exactly was he? Chao Rong, you're here too. A very thin young man walked over with a smile. I didn't expect you to be so well informed even though you haven't been in Wuxia City for long. Ding Hao. Chao Rong knew that his doubts had been answered when he saw the person. Ding Hao was said to be a disciple of a sect who had been in Wuxia City for 2 years. He was talented and had excellent strength. He was also slick and well-informed. When Chao Rong first arrived in Wuxia City and went to the Armed Forces Command to go through the formalities, he happened to meet Ding Hao and obtained a lot of useful information from him. Currently, there were 3 major factions in the United Armed Forces Command. The first faction consisted of people like him who were originally in criminal investigations or other agencies. The second faction consisted of idle personnel who came from sects, and the third faction consisted of personnel who had left the military for various reasons. Due to their close backgrounds and the fact that they were in a group, the members of these three forces were more familiar with each other. In fact, the most powerful force in Wuxia City was not the Armed Forces Command, but the military. There were only about 1,300 man-wheel experts in the Armed Forces Command, and it was said that there were more than 5,000 in the military. In addition, there were some miscellaneous personnel who didn't join either the Armed Forces Command or the military. Most of them came from sects, thought highly of themselves and weren't weak. However, there were only about 100 of them. Aren't you thinking too much? I'm just passing by. This is my daily jogging route. What's going on here today? Chao Rong asked with a smile. Hearing this, Ding Hao showed a strange look. You don't know? I thought you heard about it too. It is said that a group of Earth-level experts will come today. These people are the best in the city. When they heard the news, they all wanted to see what an Earth-level expert looks like. Ding Hao raised his chin and gestured to the people on the roadside. He continued, to be honest, I'm also very curious. You have to know that neither the Armed Forces Command nor the military have an Earth-level expert. I wonder how talented they are to reach the Earth level in a few years. Chao Rong couldn't help but be envious. A few years? That's not necessarily true. Ding Hao revealed a mysterious smile. What do you mean? How did these martial arts techniques appear? They couldn't have fallen from the sky, right? Weren't they developed by scientists? Chao Rong was slightly surprised. Ding Hao shrugged his shoulders. Who knows? The two of them chatted for a while. Suddenly Ding Hao's eyes lit up. They're here. He saw a long line of new cars coming from afar. Chao Rong roughly glanced at them and estimated that there were between 50 and 60 of them. In just a few minutes, the convoy gradually approached. Ding Hao silently counted in his heart and realized that there were 56 cars. When the convoy stopped, everyone on one side of the road stared at the other side of the road. Following a series of car doors opening, 2 or 3 people got out of each car. Most of them were in their 20s or 30s. Chao Rong observed them and was shocked. They were all man-wheel experts. It might not be easy to tell if they were man-wheel experts if they didn't get close, but Chao Rong had been a criminal investigator for so many years. His observation skills weren't comparable to others. Regardless of strength, speed, coordination, or self-control, a man-wheel expert wasn't comparable to an ordinary person. His movements were as smooth as floating clouds and flowing water, and it was pleasing to the eye. As long as one observed a little, one would be able to discern something from his movements. When the doors of the dozens of cars in the middle opened, everyone's eyes froze. They saw burly men getting out of the cars. Even though they were separated by a road, they could still feel the fierce and murderous aura coming from them. There was also a faint sense of oppression coming from them. These people, are they Earth-level experts? Even though they were separated by a road and the other party didn't even pay attention to them, Chao Rong's head began to drip with sweat. These people are very scary, Chao Rong whispered. This was the intuition that he had gained from experiencing life and death. His intuition told him that these people were extremely dangerous. As for their strength, the difference was too great so he couldn't tell. However, he believed that there were definitely Earth-level experts among them or even all of them. There were more than 20 of them. Was it possible for more than 20 Earth-level experts? They are indeed scary. The smile on Ding Hao's face disappeared and was replaced with a solemn expression. Just now, a person glanced in this direction, and it gave me a creepy feeling. Those people are the legendary Earth-level experts. Subsequently, a bald man with no eyebrows got out of the car. He was wearing simple sportswear and a white t-shirt. Although he wasn't as strong as the previous people, he still made those who noticed him feel a sense of oppression. And that person's position was in the center of everyone. As long as everyone looked at that person's position after getting out of the car, they would know his identity. He must be the most important person in this group. He looks familiar. Chao Rong muttered in his heart after seeing the other party's face clearly. He was very confident in his memory. As long as he had seen someone before, he would never forget them, especially such a special person. Where had he seen him before? He waited until everyone on the opposite side of the road entered the building, but he was still thinking. The people on this side of the road also began to gradually disperse. These people came with all kinds of motives, but after seeing those people, no one dared to go forward. The other party's aura made them feel extreme danger. One had to know that there was no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. There might be people who wanted to see the strength of an Earth-level expert. However, just the aura alone made so many experts in the city not dare to go forward, which showed the power of the other party. Countless people swore in their hearts that they would also reach this level. When Chao Rong woke up, there were very few people on this road, and even Ding Hao was nowhere to be seen. Chao Rong wasn't in the mood to continue jogging, so he walked back while thinking. He went through all the people in his memory from the most recent memory to the past. When he was about to reach home, his whole body suddenly froze in place. A wanted poster and a person's figure gradually overlapped. Ren Baqian. His high school classmate. His appearance was above average, his family background was ordinary, his personality was gentle but not strange. In short, he was an extremely ordinary classmate. Chao Rong had never participated in the class reunions after graduation, and no one cared. However, when he later received news that it was an AAA level wanted poster, he was very surprised and even contacted all the classmates he could contact to ask about him. However, the wanted poster was inexplicably cancelled later. The internal network of the police station didn't find any news of his arrest, and it seemed that his wanted poster was directly cancelled, which was extremely rare. Because of these two incidents, he had a very deep impression of this old classmate. The person just now had his hair and eyebrows removed and he was a little chubbier. Other than that, his height, face shape, eyes, nose, and lips were very similar to his old classmate. It could even be said that they were exactly the same. At the thought of this, Chao Rong hurried home, quickly flipped through his graduation photos, found that person, and recalled the person he saw just now. Indeed, they were the same. However, other than the same appearance and height, their movements, temperament, and other aspects were completely different. What are you doing? Looking through the photos as soon as you came back, just to take a look at your high school graduation photo? A woman in her 30s asked curiously. Do you remember our high school classmate named Ren Baqian? Chao Rong asked after regaining his senses. Yes, he had a younger brother named Ren Wanyan. You even said that he was a 1,000-year-old tortoise. The woman laughed. I remember that you mentioned him a few years ago. He became a wanted criminal, right? I was quite surprised. I never thought that he would become a wanted criminal. Don't mention the wanted criminal anymore. The wanted poster has long been cancelled and he isn't a wanted criminal. Chao Rong shook his head. Then why did you think of him? I just saw a person who looked like him. There are many people who look like him, the woman said indifferently. Chao Rong put his things back and sat on the sofa in a daze. Indeed, there were many people who looked like him and he might be thinking too much. He must be thinking too much. How could they be the same person? No matter how he thought about it, it was impossible. Even if Ren Baqian could come to Wuxia City, it was impossible for him to be surrounded by more than 20 legendary Earth-class experts and hundreds of manwheel experts. Recommended new book by an excellent author, National Martial Cultivation. Chapter 873. Ren Baqian finally arrived at the headquarters of Wuxia City. He had learned a little from Ren Wanyan and Ding Jie over the years, but this was his first time here. Not only did he bring along the winged cavalry, but he also brought along more than 100 core disciples. Most of the disciples from the inner sect and above would also rush over after finishing their business. This would be his headquarters and the headquarters of the martial arts center in the future. Ren Baqian headed straight for the roof. The top 2 floors of this building were his residences. The 37th floor covered an area of more than 10,000 square meters. It included a swimming pool, a cinema, a training ground, a small playground, a living room, a supermarket. This was a must. More than a dozen suites, a few servants' quarters, a kitchen, and most importantly, a hanging garden that covered an area of thousands of square meters and was designed in the style of a Jiangnan waterside pavilion. As for the 38th floor, it was only 3,000 square meters. It mainly included his and the Empress's bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, baby's room, swimming pool, and a home theater, about the size of a normal theater. Basically, it would take an hour to go around these 2 floors. Ren Baqian was very satisfied. After all, compared to the palace, the previous villa was too small and wasn't even as big as the palace. It didn't matter to him, but it wasn't worthy of the Empress's status. Furthermore, he was going to have a son. He was going to have a son. He was going to have a son. His and the Empress's child would definitely be alive and kicking, right? There should be a bigger place for him to play to his heart's content. Ren Baqian only knew what alive and kicking meant after the child was born. Ren Baqian was a little anxious to go back when he thought of the Empress. However, before that he got someone to look for Xin Feng. Boss, are you looking for me? After 9 years, Xin Feng had changed a lot. Xin Feng was married. Although she still had her refreshing short hair and unisex attire, she was much more feminine. Did you leak the information to Qi Jieyu? Ren Baqian's face darkened. Besides Xin Feng, it was impossible for Qi Jieyu to know that he was the mastermind. Boss, you didn't pay attention to her. She's actually very smart. It's not surprising that she guessed some things, Xin Feng replied seriously. You also said that I guessed some things. If I can guess that it's someone I met twice 8 years ago, I would be a deity. Ren Baqian's face turned cold. Xin Feng looked at Ren Baqian, hesitated for a moment and said, Boss, if you want to punish me, just punish me. I have been paying attention to her all this while. I know what she's thinking and understand her feelings. After all, I'm also a woman and it's inevitable that I have sympathy. Ren Baqian looked at Xin Feng and sighed. Go and get $1 million. Consider it your severance pay. You've done well these past few years. Xin Feng's expression changed slightly, but she knew that this was normal. In fact, she had already guessed that this was one of the most likely outcomes, and it was also a relatively good one. He bowed to Ren Baqian. Goodbye, boss. After Xin Feng left, Ren Baqian sat on the sofa, feeling somewhat vexed. He had long known that Xin Feng was a citizen of the country, but he did not care. Moreover, she had been sitting very well. However, what Xin Feng had done had placed him in a predicament. After sitting for a while, he turned around. He returned to Pingle Park, where there were 2 pandas and a Ting Ting. The Roaring Emperor would often come here. After changing his clothes, he went to Yaohua Palace and saw that the Empress was dressing up. Ren Baqian walked over, hugged her from behind, and pressed his cheek against hers. The vexation of the past few days suddenly dissipated. After enjoying the tenderness for a moment, Ren Baqian took the wooden comb from Hong Luan and began to groom the Empress. As he combed, he softly recited, "The hills overlap, the clouds at the temples shine like snow." After waiting for a while, the Empress realized that Ren Baqian had stopped reciting and said, "There seems to be more? Too lazy to draw a moth's eyebrows, too late to do makeup and wash up." Reflecting on the flowers in front and behind the mirror, the faces of the flowers reflect each other. Ren Baqian didn't read the last sentence, combed the Empress's hair and coiled it into a bun. He carefully admired it and felt that it was pretty artistic. Hong Wan should do it. The Empress said faintly as she looked at the chicken coop above her head in the mirror. I can't go to court like this. Hong Wan coiled the Empress's hair while Ren Baqian sat at the side and said, Your Majesty, do you still remember that person who looks like you? Didn't you say that you might need her for a breakthrough? I have some impression of her, the Empress replied. After all, Earth isn't Dayo, and it's impossible for everything to be under control. No one can say for sure what will happen. If she dies accidentally, I'm afraid that it will affect your Majesty's plans. Why don't you kill her now? Ren Baqian said faintly. His heart was cold and full of killing intent. Why did you suddenly mention this? The Empress looked at Ren Baqian through the mirror strangely and casually said, If she dies, then so be it. If I want to break through, do I still need external help? If it weren't for you, I would have already broken through. The youngest aboriginal since ancient times, Longevity Heaven. This title isn't bad and I quite like it. As for her, I only felt that she could be of some use at that time. If you didn't mention it, I'm afraid I would have forgotten about it. If your Majesty breaks through to Longevity Heaven, I'm afraid that I'll really have to devote myself to it until my death, Ren Baqian said with a smile. The Empress rolled her eyes at him. Then he thought for a while and said, Actually, it's nothing. I just suddenly remembered when I saw her on Earth. The Empress looked at him in the mirror and said, You're hiding something from me. You had a murderous aura just now which isn't your usual self. After saying this, she looked at herself in the mirror and waited for Ren Baqian's answer. Your Majesty planted a trace of your soul with me. Every time I see her, I naturally have a murderous intent. When I mentioned her just now, I remembered the feeling when I saw her. Ren Baqian smiled calmly. Only then did the Water Empress feel relieved. Then a sweet smile appeared on her face. Splitting that strand of my soul was very painful for me. That strand of divine soul has been intertwined with your divine soul for generations to come. Then her expression changed and she said fiercely, If you let me down, I'll destroy that trace of your soul. That's murdering your husband. Ren Baqian pretended to be shocked. The Empress snorted, thought about it and talked about Qi Jieyu. She sighed and said, However, the world is really mysterious. When I saw that person, I also had a murderous intent. As you said, there's a certain connection between me and her. They're obviously 2 different worlds, but they're related to me. However, I'm the heaven and she's the earth. Although that person is related to me, there's no need to care about her. Rinpoche nodded and put this matter aside. After the empress went to court, he concentrated and continued to be busy. The first was the location of the new city. In the past 2 months, Rinpoche had already sent people around Lan City to understand the surrounding situation. There was a rather suitable plain about half a day's journey southeast of Lan City. There were even 2 rivers flowing through it. The water flow was gentle, and there wouldn't be any problems even during the rainy season when the water level rose. It was suitable for living, easy to obtain water, and not difficult to build roads. The scenery was also very good. Chapter 874. In addition to being in the palace and the school, most people would have to deal with all sorts of things. After a long time they would definitely feel suffocated. Otherwise, the ancient emperors would love to travel when they had nothing to do. Unfortunately, they had to deal with a lot of things every day. Secondly, the identity of the emperor was too important. Going out wasn't a simple trip and it cost a lot of money. As a result, there was another situation: traveling incognito. When they had nothing to do, they would disguise themselves and visit a brothel. For example, that's so-and-so and so-and-so again. They left behind many stories that would be passed down through the ages. For example, Zhao Fian and Li Shishir. However, there were also some who had a bad start. Emperor Tongji visited a brothel and died. This showed that, I'm going off topic, I'm talking about traveling. It was troublesome for an ordinary emperor to travel, but in a martial arts world, there was no need to consider these problems if the emperor was a cheat. For example, when the empress went out, there was a guard of honor most of the time, but that was only to show her noble status. If something really happened, it wasn't certain who would be protecting who. Therefore, when he had nothing to do, he would often travel light. For example, now that the empress was riding Qi Shui and Rinpoche was riding the Crow General, they were followed by Tong Xinye and a group of officials from the Ministry of Works. In addition, there were 20 to 30 imperial bodyguards. The empress sat on the back of Qi Shui and looked at the lush fields as she suddenly asked, "Why do the crops in this field seem different?" Although the empress didn't know much about farming, she had seen pigs run before. Most of the fields she had seen before were hundreds of acres of the same crop. At this moment, she was curious when she saw 2 crops intertwined in a field. It's sugar cane and sweet potatoes. Sugar cane takes more than 10 months to grow. It would be a pity to leave the field empty during the seedling stage, and other crops can be planted. Rinpoche understood after a glance. He was the one who informed the Ministry of Works about this. He had wanted to make sugar cane for a long time. The sugar in this world was mainly extracted from beets, which was too inefficient and expensive. After changing to sugar cane, Rinpoche felt that he could open a sugar factory. Sugar cane wasn't any slower than glass products and spices. At least, he was confident that he could dig out Lin Xiaola's treasury. Lin Xiaola had stayed in Qingxin Palace Hall for so many years and didn't have much to spend, so she should have saved up some money. Sugarcane, is that the kind of crop that you said can extract sugar from? The empress was obviously very interested in the weed-like sugarcane sprouts in the field. Or rather, he was very interested in sugar. The value of this thing isn't limited to making sugar. Rinpoche laughed. Your Majesty should have seen the cars on Earth, but we can't find oil here, so we have to develop other technologies such as biodiesel. However, there is another very convenient alternative, which is ethanol. Large amounts of ethanol could be extracted from both sugar cane and sweet potatoes. Although Rinpoche had decided to develop diesel, ethanol was equally important. The main reason was that these 2 types of fuels had different ignition points, densities, and development directions. It's like the difference between gasoline and diesel. Nowadays, Dayo's technology was advancing by leaps and bounds. Even the steam engine wasn't widely used and could only be seen in some factories. However, Rinpoche was already preparing to set up a laboratory to study the internal combustion engine. After all, with the internal combustion engine, the transportation time and manpower would be greatly reduced. Even farming would require less manpower. Coupled with the cement roads that were being built, the entire Dayo would be able to develop rapidly. Can ethanol be made into wine? The empress asked after thinking for a while. Although the empress was ignorant and incompetent, she didn't know much about this area, she still paid some attention to things that interested her. At the very least, she knew that ethanol was alcohol. If the concentration of ethanol is high enough, it can be used as fuel. Rinpoche gave an example: water of life. The empress's expression immediately became strange. She looked at Rinpoche with narrowed eyes and didn't know what she was thinking. A few days ago, after she and Rinpoche left the wedding, that bunch of scoundrels almost burned down Zichen Palace Hall. Moreover, Lian Liang even tore down half a wall. Thinking of this, the empress started to feel suffocated. During her wedding they set fire to the palace and destroyed it? The cause of that incident was the water of life. And the main culprit who took out the water of life was Rinpoche. At this moment, Rinpoche naturally didn't realize that his loose tongue reminded the empress of what he had done. He was in high spirits as he introduced the uses of the sweet potatoes and sugar cane. Ever since the introduction of high-yield crops like sweet potatoes and pumpkins, the price of food in Dayo had dropped significantly over the past 3 years. In other words, the price of crops like sweet potatoes was low enough. The monthly income of an ordinary person in Dayo was 1.5 to 2 taels of silver, the salary of a soldier was 3 to 4 taels of silver, the salary of a low-ranking official was 6 taels of silver, and the winged cavalry warriors were paid 10 taels of silver. 1 tael of silver was equivalent to 1,200 copper coins. However, because Dayo produced very little copper, there were more cases of trading broken silver. After all, the people of Dayo weren't like the people of the Yun nation or Great Xia, who bought vegetables and meat in half a caddy. The people of the Yun nation said, "Give me 2 taels of meat. Give me 1 caddy of cabbage." Then they threw out a handful of copper coins. The people of Dayo said, "Give me 15 caddies of beef." Then they went to another stall and said, "I'll exchange 1.5 caddies of beef for 1 caddy of beets." In Dayo, beef was one of the cheapest foods and only cost 10 copper coins per caddy. Ordinary people had to eat 2 caddies of meat a day, and an adult's income was just enough to fill their stomachs. Fortunately, men and women were truly equal in Dayo. Both men and women had to work to support their families so they could barely fill their stomachs. This was also thanks to the low fertility of the people of Dayo. If there were 7 or 8 people in a family, many would starve to death. Bones cost 3 copper coins per caddy. Mutton cost 12 copper coins per caddy. However, people couldn't just eat meat. Vegetables and grains were much more expensive. Salt cost 120 copper coins per caddy. Beets usually cost 25 to 30 copper coins per caddy. Edible wild vegetables cost about 20 copper coins per caddy. Coarse rice with stones in it cost 25 copper coins per caddy, and the black flour that gave off a sour smell cost 35 copper coins per caddy. As for the fragrant rice from the Yun nation and Great Xia, even ordinary officials couldn't afford it. It cost 250 copper coins per caddy, which was equivalent to 2 taels of silver per caddy. 1 caddy of meat was enough to fill one's stomach, but 4 caddies of grains and vegetables were needed. Therefore, the people of Dayo were so poor that they could only eat meat. As 3 years passed, high-yielding crops like sweet potatoes and potatoes, which were harvested 2 to 3 times a year, began to impact the diet of the people. In Lan City, sweet potatoes cost 3 copper coins per caddy, and pumpkins and potatoes cost 4 copper coins. Coarse rice had risen to 35 copper coins per caddy. After discovering that it was easy to grow and didn't need to worry about it, many people directly planted sweet potatoes. As a result, the price of other grains became more expensive. However, the emergence of these high-yielding crops had greatly enriched the people's dining tables, and they no longer had to worry about hunger. After all, 1 caddy of sweet potatoes was equivalent to 1 caddy of mutton. The people's dining tables basically changed from stewed beef, roasted beef, and boiled beef to stewed beef with potatoes, stewed beef with sweet potatoes, and stewed beef with pumpkin. In this regard, Rinpoche's contribution wasn't small. Chapter 875. In Dayo not only was food expensive but all resources were also expensive. When Rinpoche first arrived, salt cost 120 copper coins per tael. 50 copper coins for a tael of honey. Roughly brewed fruit wine, 100 copper coins per caddy. When Rinpoche first arrived at the beast park, the caretaker treated him to hard liquor, inferior liquor, from the Yun nation which cost 1 tael of silver per caddy. As for the other materials such as linen cloth, 1 tael of silver each, brown cloth, 3 taels of silver each, and silk cloth, 30 taels of silver each. In this world, a horse was 4 zhang, which was equivalent to 13 meters. An ordinary person's monthly income was only enough to buy 1.5 bolts of sackcloth. In Dayo, ordinary people wore animal hides, and only those who were better off could wear sackcloth. Low-ranking officials could only wear 2 sets of clothes made of cloth all year round. Even if there was a hole in the clothes, they would feel heartache and gasp in shock. A few days ago, when Rinpoche was chatting with Lin Mingxing, they talked about the situation of the people in the Yun nation. In this day and age, scholars were not ordinary people. There were very few commoners who could study. Most of the children of merchants and government officials had the opportunity to study. This was the case for Lin Mingxing. Although his family was not considered wealthy in the Yun nation, it was still considered wealthy. Logically speaking, such scholars were usually aloof from worldly affairs, but Lin Mingxing was very familiar with the lives of the common people, and could be considered an anomaly. The income of the people of the Yun nation was lower than that of the people of Dayo. After all, Dayo was vast and sparsely populated, and the resources per capita were much higher. Furthermore, ordinary people were at least at the man-wheel level and had great strength. Whether it was farming or hunting, they were much better than the citizens of other countries. In the Yun nation, a man-wheel expert's monthly income was at least 10 taels of silver. An earth-wheel expert's monthly salary would be at least 100 taels of silver if he were to work as a consecrator in the warlord's residence. On the other hand, Dayo's winged cavalry only paid 10 taels of silver a month. The monthly income of the people in the Yun nation was no more than 800 to 1,000 copper coins. In the Yun nation, 1 caddy of salt was only 100 copper coins. Brown rice was 8 copper coins per caddy, and coarse grain flour was 11 copper coins. This was 1/3 to 1/4 of the price in Dayo. On the other hand, the price of beef was 50 copper coins per caddy. The main reason was that the Yun nation was more involved in farming than herding. Even though the slaughter of cows wasn't prohibited like the Tang dynasty, they could still serve as a strong laborer. Therefore they were quite expensive. A rooster costs 20 copper coins and a hen costs 15 copper coins. 1 bolt of linen cost 300 copper coins, 1 bolt of linen cost 600 copper coins, 1 bolt of silk cost 2 taels of silver, and the satin cost 10 taels of silver. The prices of goods were only 1/3 to 1/4 of those in Dayo, and even 1/10 of those in Dayo. Their income was half that of the aboriginals. More importantly, they ate very little. Even though their fertility rate was slightly higher, with each family having 3 or 4 children overall, their lives were still slightly better than that of the aboriginals. Of course, this was only slightly better, and it was even equivalent. This was because aboriginal commoners rarely fell sick. Most of their injuries were caused by hunting or fighting. The biggest cause of accidental death, other than dying in the mouth of wild beasts and being bitten or infected by wild beasts, was childbirth. On the other hand, the people of the Yun nation were completely ordinary people. When they were sick, they would go to the doctor if they had the money. If they didn't, they would just wait for death. In short, the common people of this era were just trying to survive and survive. The real difference was that there were many middle classes in the Yun nation. There were many merchants in the Yun nation, and it wasn't like ancient China, where merchants were ranked at the bottom. In the Yun nation, commerce was developed, and the status of merchants wasn't low. Small merchants and peddlers usually didn't have to worry about food and clothing. There were also many so-called wealthy squires, and there were even wealthy merchants who could hire earthwheel experts. The living conditions of these people were very good. The standard of living of a middle-class wealthy family was much better than that of Tongjinya. The wealthy merchants were even more extravagant. Due to the prevalence of merchants in the Yun nation, it catalyzed technological progress in various aspects. For example, smelting and textiles, they were much better than Great Xia. Zidonglai had once reported to the Empress that the Yun nation's continuous firing ballistae were a type of relatively advanced weapon in this era. From various aspects, the Yun nation had already seen the emergence of capitalism. As long as the Yun nation wasn't destroyed and continued along this path, it would only be a matter of time before it blossomed and bore fruit. Unfortunately, they met a socialist hammer like Rinpochen. Rinpochen felt that he had corrected their erroneous capitalistic path and led them to the socialist family. Don't ask about socialism. What about the Empress? This was a socialist feudal country with Dayo's characteristics. Shouldn't the nation give him some commendation and at least let him join a party or something? It was fine to take a step back and join a group. Not the FFF group. Rinpochen thought about it and remembered that he was a member of the FFF before he came to Dayo. After thinking about it for a while, he laughed first. Like a fool. The Empress rolled her eyes at him. She didn't see many people start to laugh foolishly after thinking about it. She couldn't be bothered with him and rode Qi Shui to the front. After less than half a day, everyone arrived at their destination. Standing on a hill, they could see a vast expanse in front of them that overlooked the entire plain. 2 rivers meandered across the plains, encircling the grassland. Large herds of cattle and sheep wandered on the plains. There was also a small forest at the corner of the grassland. Most of the trees grew fruit trees. When Rinpoche came over, he tasted them. They tasted sweet, slightly sour, juicy, and pretty good. "Is this the place?" the Empress asked after stopping Qi Shui and looking down. "The scenery isn't bad. This is the place." Rinpoche nodded and said, "Especially those two rivers. They are generally between 10 to 20 meters deep, which is enough for boats to travel. Furthermore, they won't flood during the rainy season." The two rivers converged downstream to form a large river that flowed through the border between the Yun Nation and the Qin Nation. "If the new city is built here, we can save a lot of effort in transporting goods. Relying on river transportation, trade will be more prosperous." Rinpoche calmed himself down and said, "The new city that I envision doesn't have city walls. It's just a plain that can be expanded in all directions." In Rinpoche's vision, the new city would sooner or later reach a scale of millions or even tens of millions of people, and it was extremely important to facilitate expansion. "You don't want the city walls?" "It doesn't seem appropriate," Tong Jingye said subconsciously when he heard the last sentence. "What's wrong with that?" Rinpoche asked. Tong Jingye was stunned by this question. What's wrong with it? They were afraid that wild beasts and enemies would attack them, so the city walls could play a defensive role. Under normal circumstances, this was indeed the case. But this was a plain and there were no ferocious beasts. As an ancient race, they were never afraid of others attacking them. It had always been them beating up others. Thinking about it this way, it did not seem to be inappropriate. Sir Tong's thinking has been solidified by his previous understanding. Others need city walls, but we don't. What's more, which country in history had ever used a city wall to defend against an enemy? This is the capital, not the border. If the enemy can reach here, it doesn't matter if there are city walls or not. Rinpoche laughed. That's the logic, but I still feel a little strange. Tong Jingye scratched his head. If we want to achieve the level of an industrialized society, a large population is essential. We are different from other countries that develop normally. We incubate technology in Lan City and radiate it to the surrounding areas with Lan City as the center. We use the fastest speed to advance our technology. Therefore, building such a super capital is the best choice. Lan City, for example, has a population of only tens of thousands. This population is too small, and we can't recruit people after building a few factories. A small population didn't just mean that they couldn't recruit workers. There were also fewer laborers, teenagers of the right age, and students. Simply put, a small population meant a small potential. However, if there are more people, there won't be enough food and it will be difficult to transport them. We won't be able to support them. Tong Jingye continued. In this era, the food in the city mainly came from the surroundings. On one hand, it was because of low productivity and low output. On the other hand, it was difficult to transport food and it would cost too much to transport. A city like Lan City could generally support a population of more than 100,000 people. If it was the capital of a country, it could even reach a population of hundreds of thousands or millions. Chapter 876. Be careful, Your Majesty. There are strange fish in this river, Rinpoche shouted at the Empress. It wasn't just this river. There were many strange fish in all the rivers in Dayo. Giant crocodiles were one of the more common ones, and there were many others with strange appearances. For example, this river. Before Rinpoche could finish his sentence, more than a dozen black snake-like creatures shot out of the river like arrows. These creatures were about the length of a forearm and as thick as 2 fingers. They had mouths full of fangs, and their jaws could reach 180 degrees like a snake's. The Empress didn't even look at them. She waved her hand in the air, and those creatures exploded in the air, spraying red blood everywhere. The next scene could make someone with trypophobia faint. Hundreds of similar creatures shot out of the river and fought for the flesh in the air. There were also countless black heads on the surface of the water. They were so densely packed that it gave people goosebumps. The Empress's face turned cold. She waved her hand in the air, and the hundreds of creatures in the air turned into a rain of blood. The river's surface sank and the creatures in the water exploded one after another. The entire river was dyed red. The river was quiet for a few minutes. Then, countless strange black fish appeared in the water and frantically devoured the flesh of their own kind. Your Majesty, it's dangerous. Rinpoche pulled the Empress's arm. What's the danger? The Empress didn't care, but she still frowned and asked, why are there so many of them? Rinpoche forcefully pulled the Empress's arm back. He grabbed her waist and pulled her back. He hugged her thighs and pulled her back. It felt like he was pulling a metal pillar. It didn't budge at all. What are you doing? The Empress turned her head, put her hands under Rinpoche's armpits, and then lifted him up, high up. A graceful lady in red with her hands under her armpits was lifting a man who weighed more than 100 kilograms. To outsiders, this scene didn't seem out of place. "I'm trying to see if I can move you. In fact, it's too dangerous here and I want to pull you back a little." Rinpoche opened his arms and mimicked the action on the Titanic. Then he was thrown to the ground by the Empress. "What danger?" The Empress scoffed. "The danger doesn't come from those strange fish. It comes from those parasites on their bodies." Rinpoche came up and put his hand into her clothes. "Pa." The Empress unceremoniously made a pig's trotter. "Your Majesty, can you check if there's anything extra on your body?" Rinpoche retracted his hand. The Empress was slightly taken aback. "It's a small thing that's as thin as a cow's hair. It has an extremely fast ejection speed. Usually they parasitized on the surface of the strange fish. When the strange fish jumped out of the water, they would also follow and shoot toward the target. If one didn't know, it would be easy to fall for it. These things will become bigger after sucking the blood of living creatures. At the same time, they can inject a small amount of poison to cause hallucinations. Then they will fall into the river and be eaten by those strange fishes. Moreover, they can even bite a hole in ironware. Although His Majesty's body is tough, we still have to guard against it." Upon hearing Rinpoche's words, the Empress's expression changed slightly. As long as one was a woman, they would have an instinctive disgust towards insects, especially these creatures that crawled on their bodies and sucked their blood. The Empress squinted her eyes and sensed carefully, following which her facial expression turned ugly. He actually had it on him. This made the Empress feel disgusted, as if she had eaten a fly. This thing could actually penetrate the force of her palm and land on her body. Furthermore, it could even hide from her. If it wasn't for Rinpoche's reminder, she probably wouldn't have been able to discover those subtle incongruities. In the next second, the force exploded from the surface of the Empress's body. The Empress controlled the force on the surface of her body, and ordinary creatures would be shocked to death. However, the creatures that the Empress sensed still hadn't disappeared. The Empress's face turned green, and her body emitted a crackling sound. This wasn't the sound of her bones, but the sound of the air on the surface of her body. A strong wind swept around the Empress, and the lawn under her feet was instantly turned into debris. Subsequently, it was ground into extremely fine dust by the wind. However, the incongruities on the surface of the Empress's body didn't move at all. This time the Empress started to feel a little scared. "Your Majesty, although these things are extremely weak and can be crushed to death with one finger, they aren't afraid of force," Rinpoche said at this moment. The Empress glared at him. Rinpoche spread his hands and expressed his helplessness. In fact, he had been watching the show from the side for a long time. However, these things weren't very dangerous. If it was just one person, it would be somewhat dangerous, as they would easily fall into the water after experiencing hallucinations. However, if it was two people, as long as one of them was awake, there wouldn't be any danger. Furthermore, after sucking blood, these things could at most grow to the size of a pinky finger and would automatically fall off. The Empress grabbed Rinpoche and ran into the distance, leaving behind only a sentence: "Everyone wait here. If anyone dares to follow us, kill without mercy." In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Empress had run more than 15 kilometers with Rinpoche before finding a forest to stop. The Empress turned her body, and her red muslin and white undergarments fluttered in the air. "Capture them for me." The Empress had goosebumps all over her body. After having so many bugs on her body for so long, no one could accept it. Rinpoche saw the Empress's body in front of him. From head to toe she was perfect and full of temptation. He subconsciously felt a wave of fire rising in him. He suppressed the fire in his heart and carefully looked at the places that the Empress had pointed at. There were only a few thin lines that were as thick as a cow's hair, which meant that these things hadn't broken through the surface of the Empress's skin. One had to know that these things could even drill through iron. Rinpoche stretched out his hand and crushed the thin lines. With a flick they fell off. The heads of these things were relatively hard and weren't afraid of qigong, but their bodies were extremely fragile. A total of 7 bugs were taken off by Rinpoche, and the Empress heaved a sigh of relief. She was then hugged by Rinpoche and said, "It seems that there are still some that I haven't found. I have to look carefully. Has your waist recovered?" The Empress's voice was full of provocation. "This is a rare opportunity." Rinpoche laughed. They were usually in the palace, but this feeling was completely different. This was a rare opportunity. They're still waiting. Let them continue to wait. Not long after, the two of them rolled on the ground. Whether it was rocks or trees, as long as they were hit, they would be smashed into pieces. The ground was left with large traces of being run over by a road roller. Half a day later, Tang Xinye stood there and looked in the direction that the empress had disappeared. His face gradually began to turn black. They hadn't returned after so long. After another half a day, Tang Xinye finally knew that they wouldn't be able to wait for them today. According to past practice, they probably wouldn't be able to wait for them tomorrow or the day after. Should he go back or not? What should we do, Minister? An official from the Ministry of Works came up and asked. Wait. Tang Xinye added, wait here. I'll go back to the city to settle some things and come back after that. Ren Baqian and the Empress were in this desolate wilderness with their limbs tightly intertwined, enjoying the pleasure of their divine senses and physical bodies fusing. 1.5 days later, the environment around them suddenly changed. The Empress was aware of the change in the environment and felt relieved when she realized that there was no one around. 2.5 days later, the two of them finally let go of each other. The Empress's body was covered in a rosy glow, and she was dazzling. Where is this? The Empress asked. The headquarters of Wuxia City. Rinpoche put one hand on his waist and the other on the wall as he looked up at the big hole above him. The two of them had directly broken through more than 10 floors. The quality of the construction is too poor. Rinpoche felt that he had to look for trouble. Due to the strength of the martial artists, Rinpoche specially made all the walls and floors thicker, making them almost 2.5 times thicker than normal. Which construction company was responsible for this? With this quality? Chapter 877. In fact, the commotion caused by Rinpoche and the Empress had already been noticed. This building, which was named Guchuan, had already been put into use. Of course, the area below was mainly used, but the area above was also cleaned every day. Moreover, the sound of them crashing through the floors could be heard from below. However, they were stopped before they could go upstairs. Ning Kaichen. After more than half a year of surgeries, Ning Kaichen finally got what she wanted and went directly to Wuxia City. During the 6 months in Thailand, she had learned a lot of things, including how to use a mobile phone, how to use a computer, pinyin, simplified Chinese, and fluent Thai. She had even reached the level of CET6 in English. It had to be said that there were always geniuses in this world, such as the Empress and Ning Kaichen. Ning Kaichen was a sword slave and couldn't cultivate. However, she had a learning ability that far exceeded ordinary people. After arriving in Wuxia City, she strolled around for a few days to understand the situation there. After that, she would hold a book and stare blankly at the martial arts center. When Rinpoche and the Empress caused a floor to collapse, she was aware of it. However, after approaching the floor where they were staying, Green Bead immediately sensed the aura from upstairs. After feeling the entire building shake as if it was being driven by a pile driver, she immediately retreated and stopped the winged cavalry. Do you want to go up and watch Zhao Prince Consort and Her Majesty consummate their marriage? When Ning Kaichen said this with a smile, the winged cavalry immediately turned pale. Rinpoche and the Empress changed their clothes before leading her to tour the top 2 floors. Obviously, the Empress was very satisfied with this new home. In particular, the huge supermarket was almost as big as a smaller shopping mall. Half of the space was filled with shelves of dazzling goods, while the other half was filled with all kinds of underwear and clothes. There was also a small candy house. All the clothes here are suitable for Your Majesty's figure. Rinpoche stood in the supermarket and turned around with an expression that said, "Am I handsome? Quick, praise me." Such an expression. The Empress's mouth twitched a little. She didn't feel that this scene was exaggerated. From her point of view, everything was meant to serve her. She felt that the underwear in front of her. The Empress picked up an inner treasury that looked like 2 ropes and asked, "Did you prepare this for me?" "Actually, there are better ones." Rinpoche took out sets of sexy lingerie from the rack. "Transparent ones, fishnet ones, slit ones, doo ones. You want me to wear this?" The Empress hooked the 2 ropes with one finger and smiled faintly. Life is always full of surprises. Rinpoche put on a serious expression. Otherwise it would be too boring. "Are you saying that I'm boring you?" The Empress raised her head, pointed her nostrils at him, and had a dangerous look in her eyes. "Ahem, Your Majesty, let's not overinterpret it. We have an ancient person who once wrote in a book, there are 2 trees in front of my house. One of them is a date tree and the other is also a date tree. Then, it was interpreted by others to mean a lot of things. Maybe he was just trying to reduce the number of words, right? Look, there are a few more words in one go. Isn't that right? Just like what I said just now, although His Majesty is perfect enough, our married life can be a little more surprising, a little more passionate. Then wear it for me. The Empress's eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. I'll wear it then? Your Majesty, don't be touchy. Let me tell you, my waist can't take it anymore. Rinpoche didn't even give her any discount. He quickly stripped himself clean and wrapped the 2 ropes around his legs. They broke. Rinpoche swung his waist proudly. Too small. The Empress looked at Rinpoche shamelessly swinging his waist and felt suffocated. This guy was getting more and more shameless. She rolled her eyes and suddenly said, I'm hungry. I heard that there's a kind of poached chicken. Give me 20 of them. Rinpoche's face froze and he looked down. Your Majesty, this is a personal attack. The Empress snorted and looked like she wanted to laugh. The 2 of them bickered for a long time before Rinpoche put on his clothes and prepared to go down to find something to eat. Although the mansion on the top floor was equipped with a kitchen, there weren't even any servants. Rinpoche felt that his waist couldn't support him making another lunch. In the past, he had always heard people say that they fought for 300 rounds. Rinpoche estimated that those 300 rounds wouldn't even take 4 days. He was much more awesome than them. When he went downstairs, he saw Ning Kaichen and a group of winged cavalry warriors guarding the elevator. Everyone bowed their heads in greeting. All of you can leave. Ask the chef to prepare something in large quantities. First, bring a few cows and a few sheep. Be quick. Rinpoche instructed. Ning Kaichen, stay behind. Hey, the curator is here. Is that Master's wife? She's much prettier than a celebrity. By the way, have you seen the curator fight? Whispers came from afar. Some people were curious about Rinpoche's strength. After all, they could vaguely feel his aura, which was similar to that of those coaches. However, no one knew exactly how strong he was. After all, the coaches often demonstrated to them and didn't see the curator much, let alone see him fight. He's definitely stronger than the coaches in the gym. Otherwise, how can he intimidate them? Isn't that obvious? The coaches in our gym are all Earth-class experts. I heard that there aren't any Earth-class experts in the army. If the boss is stronger than the coaches, wouldn't he be the best in the world? Do you know Pen Kai Huai? He's one of the top core disciples, but he can't even touch the corner of the boss's clothes. However, the boss only showed his strength once and I didn't get to see him again. I knew that the curator was an expert the moment I saw him. Look at his forehead and the brightness. I don't know what kind of strange martial arts he practiced. Is that Master's wife? That temperament isn't that of an ordinary person. Why do I feel that Master's wife is stronger than the curator? You can't tell? Although Master's wife is beautiful, she's definitely stronger than the curator. Someone retorted. Rinpoche glanced over and saw more than a dozen disciples forming a small circle and whispering. If this group of people continued to gossip, he wouldn't be able to take it anymore. Rinpoche suddenly looked fierce. Cough cough. Do all of you have nothing to do? This group of people wasn't young and they were all above the middle level of the manwheel level. They were considered top experts on Earth, but they were still so gossipy. They didn't have the bearing of an expert at all. Chapter 878. How do you feel? Rinpoche asked as he and Ning Kaichen found a corner to sit down. I've never felt so good. Ning Kaichen's eyes shone brightly as she spoke. Coupled with her charming face, Rinpoche felt that there weren't many people in this world who could resist her charm. Sometimes it was really strange. When Ning Kaichen was originally a man, she was delicate and pretty. However, after dressing up as a woman, she immediately underwent earth-shattering changes. Every frown and smile was captivating, making it impossible to associate her with her previous self. If the Ning family saw her now, they probably wouldn't be able to recognize her as their family's sword master even if they were beaten to death. In this situation, Rinpoche could only say that she was originally suitable to be a woman. How do you feel about this world? It's very interesting. I like it here very much. As Your Highness said, most people in this world have knowledge equivalent to that of a scholar, which is simply shocking. Furthermore, cell phones and computers allow everyone to understand the happenings in every corner of the world. Everyone's knowledge is boundless, and they are much more knowledgeable than the ordinary officials of Great Xia. Ning Kaichen paused for a while as if she had more to say. Rinpoche waited with great interest for her to continue. Ning Kaichen sorted out her thoughts and said, However, those who can become more than 10,000 people in the Yun Nation and Great Xia are outstanding. If they were placed in this world, they wouldn't be lost in the crowd. It can only be said that the people in this world are simply too blessed by nature, which makes people jealous. No matter how poor they are, they can at least fill their stomachs. As long as they have the heart, they at least have the opportunity to learn knowledge. This alone is something that Great Xia can't achieve. Naturally, only after the productivity is liberated and resources are abundant will people have the energy to do other things. Rinpoche smiled faintly. This was what he had always wanted to do, to free the people of Dayo from the endless struggle for survival. As for Ning Xiqin's views on the Great Xia officials, Rinpoche agreed with her. Capable people wouldn't be lost in the crowd. Have you used your mobile phone? Rinpoche asked. Yes, it's very convenient and interesting. I also have a multi-tone account. I thought it was fun at the time, so I casually used it. Now, I have about 18 million fans? Ning Qiqin pursed her lips and smiled. Rinpoche was confused. What? Douyin? Rinpoche naturally knew about it. It was a short video social media app from more than 10 years ago. Although homogenization was serious and there was a decline 2 years ago, the number of users was still not small. However, after the entire nation started cultivating, this video platform became popular again. After all, there were many people who wanted to show off. Ordinary people could also see the performance of other martial artists from the videos and learn some cultivation methods. However, what had Ning Qiqin been doing for the past 6 months? He underwent surgery, recuperated, learned how to use a mobile phone, and even created a WeChat account to become an internet celebrity with 18 million followers? Did you perform a flying sword performance? This thought subconsciously emerged in his mind. Of course not. There are no sword slaves in this world. I've read about sword immortals in Xinxia novels and movies, and they're quite similar to us. However, they are much more carefree than us. Ning Qiqin pursed her lips and smiled. I performed a sword dance and taught them how to put on makeup as well as how to make a woman more attractive. Other than giving a thumbs up, Rinpoche didn't know what else to say. Keep a low profile. After all, you still have a mission in the future. Becoming an internet celebrity won't be very beneficial to your mission in the future, Rinpoche said. I like it very much. So many people are paying attention to me and praising me. It's simply wonderful. Ning Qiqin's eyes lit up. Your Highness, you don't have to worry. I can make them unable to recognize me. Makeup can turn me into anyone. Your Highness, do you want to see the so-called celebrities of this world making love to you? Bang. Rinpoche only saw a flash and Ning Qiqin was gone. There was a hole in the ground where Ning Qiqin had been, and the Empress was looking at him with a faint smile on her face with her hands behind her back. Rinpoche felt that the Empress liked to make this expression more and more. The meaning of this expression could be understood as, how do you want to die? She's a man. Rinpoche's expression didn't change. Your Majesty, are you jealous of men? I'm jealous? The Empress's expression became more and more unfriendly. I'll take it that you're not, Your Majesty. In my heart she's a man. She might even be older than me. Rinpoche changed his tone very quickly. Pfft. The Empress spat at him and strolled to the window to watch the wind. After thinking for a while, she turned around and said to Rinpoche, the new palace must be taller and have a better view. There was something that Rinpoche wanted to say. It will collapse very quickly, especially with Your Majesty's tormenting. I reckon that the day the palace is completed will be the day of demolition. Looking down at the big hole in the ground, he could clearly see the steel bars that were as thick as an index finger. Rinpoche began to worry that Ning Qiqin wouldn't be killed by the Empress, right? Ning Qiqin wasn't Tongjinya. Even a winged cavalry warrior from Kismet Heaven couldn't withstand such a blow from the Empress. Moreover, all of her strength came from the spirit swords. Fortunately, there was a sound coming from below. Ning Qiqin pulled away the concrete blocks on her body and climbed up the stairs with a face full of dirt. Rinpoche was relieved. This wasn't the first time that Ning Qiqin had been beaten like this. Why didn't she remember it? When Ning Qiqin came up, tears were rolling down her cheeks. It was truly a pitiful sight. It's bleeding my face. Rinpoche took a closer look and saw that there were a few cuts on her face. Other than that, there weren't any fractures. It seemed that the Empress had been merciful. It looked fierce, but in fact, the Empress's strength passed through Ning Qiqin and hit the ground directly. Ning Qiqin only had a few more cuts on her face. The Empress must have done it on purpose. Rinpoche felt that, if the Empress didn't change her habit of demolishing things at will, it would be useless to build a new building. Looking at Ning Kaichen carefully examining her face in the mirror, Renbachien sighed and said, "Don't look anymore. Your face can still be saved. I still have a box of black mud cream here." "Oh, that's fine." Ning Kaichen was just weeping, but in the blink of an eye she looked calm. Renbachien really wanted to give her 2 words, hee. He then asked Ning Kaichen what else she had learned these days to understand her situation so that he could decide if he should find her a tutor or something. Then Renbachien's expression was like this. Why had she finished learning simplified Chinese and Pinyin? Could she operate a computer? Fluent in Thai? Could she pass CET6 in English? Was she learning Japanese and C? Renbachien suddenly felt that he didn't need to kidnap any expert or scholar. He could just keep her here for 8 to 10 years before bringing her back. Compared to her, he had lived for more than 30 years. In fact, he had lived quite well. Why did he have to compare himself with others? What was there to compare? Am I such a person with such a strong desire to compare? Continue to learn what you are interested in. In addition, I will get someone to collect information on some people. Your task in the future is to capture these people and bring them here. You have to avoid everyone's attention. In terms of investigation and anti-investigation, it is best for you to learn more about it. Renbachien smiled kindly and suddenly felt a little dispirited. He didn't want to talk to her anymore. Chapter 879. After staying in Wuxia City for a few days, Renbachien and the Empress went out to see what this burgeoning city looked like. It had to be said that this city was different from all the other cities in the country. It was rare to see single flying motorcycles in other cities. After all, air traffic control wasn't a joke. However, there were people from the Armed Forces Command patrolling the sky on flying motorcycles every day. One could be seen basically every 3 to 5 minutes. After all, there were too many experts in Wuxia City, and the supervision had to be stricter. Furthermore, the nation had the idea of using this place as an experimental site. Since ancient times, there hadn't been any references for national martial arts practice, and the nation had to explore it bit by bit. The flying motorcycles were a small matter. What really surprised Renbachien was that in other places, people took public transportation from the car, but many of them took public transportation from the roof. It was common to see a bus passing by, and then there would be people running behind it, jumping onto the roof of the bus in 2 steps, and directly hitching a ride. There were 7 people sitting on the roof of a bus. For a moment, Renbachien wondered if he had come to a country with cheats. In addition, it could be seen that Wuxia City was different from other places. For example, had anyone seen the 36 5 elements continuous saber technique used to cut noodles? Had anyone seen someone use the steel breaking hand to mix noodles? Had anyone seen someone use their fingers to pick up fried glutinous rice balls from a frying pan? Had anyone seen someone use the Tai Fantasy sword to pierce through mutton skewers with 2 iron skewers? Had anyone seen a street sweeper use the chaotic wind staff technique? These past few days had been an eye-opener for Renbachien. Here, martial arts practice was closely related to everyone. Even the ordinary people who were selected had a good foundation and talent. The owners of the small shops on the street might even be a man-wheel expert. In other places, when regular customers and shop owners met, they would greet each other with, "The weather is good today. How's the business?" "It's all right. What do you want?" "Give me a bowl of knife-cut noodles without chopped green onions." Here, the 2 of them would greet each other. "Hey boss, your 5 elements continuous saber technique is really good. Who did you learn from?" "Ha, I won't talk about my master. I don't have the face to mention it if I'm not good at martial arts. What do you want today?" "Come, let's try first." "No, what if you lose and leave? Wouldn't I be making a loss then?" "If I lose, I'll go bankrupt today just to buy 10 bowls of seafood nouveau riche knife-cut noodles. If I win, you'll treat me to 10 bowls. "All right." The style was completely different. However, Renbachien found it rather interesting. He pulled the Empress forward and said, "Boss, let's practice with you. If we win, you'll treat us to that seafood nouveau riche knife-cut noodles until we're full." The boss looked him up and down. "Bah, you're an Earth Realm expert. How dare you bully an old man like me?" Renbachien was a little surprised. This old man had good eyesight. "Give me 2 bowls of seafood knife-cut noodles. 8,800 per bowl. That's 17,600 for both of you. This is a small business and we don't take credit." The boss's spirit was instantly lifted. Renbachien's face darkened. "You know that it's an Earth rank expert, yet you still dare to kill it so ruthlessly. The last one is still buried in the ground. Of course not. What a joke. If I sell it to others for 8,800 per bowl, I'll give you a 50% discount. The old man took out a menu and placed it in front of Ren Baqin. On the menu it really wrote, Seafood Nouveau Riche Knife-Cut Noodles, 8,800 per bowl. Ren Baqin originally thought that the other party was trying to kill him, but it turned out that the price was clearly stated. Ren Baqin really couldn't say anything. To him, money was just a number. He wanted to try out the taste of a bowl of noodles that cost 8,800. When the noodles were served, Ren Baqin glanced at them. There was only an oyster in the noodles and nothing else. The taste was quite fragrant. It was filled with a fresh aroma. Ren Baqin even felt that he could smell the smell of the sea. This aroma gave Ren Baqin some confidence. When the first mouthful of noodles entered his mouth, the freshness, fragrance, tenderness, and smoothness exploded in his mouth in an instant. Ren Baqin's eyes widened. He didn't expect to meet an expert. It wasn't that Ren Baqin hadn't eaten good food before. Even though the standard of cuisine in that world was poor, the ingredients were delicious. With some seasonings it was considered a delicacy on Earth. However, this person in front of him was different. He used ingredients from Earth to create a taste that far exceeded that of that world. He was definitely an expert. While Ren Baqin was in a daze, the Empress had already poured the noodles into her mouth. Boss, give me another 50 bowls. Subsequently, the two of them swept away all 50 bowls. The Empress touched her belly and was a little hesitant. She estimated that she could still eat another 100 bowls. However, it was fast to eat but slow to cook. If she continued to eat, she wouldn't be able to leave today. Thank you for your patronage. 456,000. The old man came over with a smile to settle the bill. Boss, I'm lacking a chef. Are you interested? Ren Baqin grinned as he settled the bill. He had the intention of abducting this old man, but he still had to pay. Your surname is Ren? The old man asked with a smile. You're really well informed. There's only so many people in this circle. If I didn't know anything, I wouldn't have lived to this day. It's not impossible for me to be your chef. What's your price? You can read all the man-wheel techniques and some earth wheel techniques in the martial arts center. Although the chances of you reaching the earth wheel level at your age aren't high, it's not impossible. If the disciples in the martial arts center want to read these techniques, they have to accumulate merit points to exchange for them. It's not a loss for you to be my chef, but you can't leak any information. The old man's eyes lit up and he laughed. It's indeed not a loss. It's a pity that I'm old and my thoughts have faded. I'll have to disappoint you. However, this old man could recommend someone whose culinary skills were no worse than this old man's. If you think it's okay, I'll ask him to look for you. Ren Baqin couldn't help but laugh. This old man was quite astute. How pitiful all parents are. One chef isn't enough. If there's anyone with similar skills, ask them to look for me together. If you're willing to come, you can come along. Then you're my boss. How should I address you? My surname is Sun Zhongliang. Ren Baqin was in a good mood after leaving. He didn't expect to meet a chef when he came out for a stroll. He didn't have to pay much and merely let Sun Zhongliang take a look at the techniques. For others, this was a great benefit. For him, the techniques that he brought back from Tianjin Basin were almost moldy, and another batch was shipped back from the Yun Nation. The next day Sun Zhongliang came over. Not only him but his son and grandson also came. The whole family of 3 was here. Ren Baqin thought about it and simply asked Sun Zhongliang to bring his family over and let them live in the building. This way he and the Empress could come back anytime they wanted to eat. The building had more than 30 floors, and the bottom 2 floors were dedicated to guest rooms. There was plenty of space. For the next 2 days the Empress thought of something while watching TV. She suddenly went downstairs to grab Ning Kaichen, stuffed her into the room and stripped her clean. Your Majesty, what are you doing? Ren Baqin looked into the room and was a little confused. He didn't know what the Empress was doing at all. Get out. If you dare to peek, I'll gouge out your eyeballs. After a while the Empress came out of the room contentedly. She looked at Ren Baqin, who had a strange look on his face, and calmly said, I just want to see the difference between an acquired and an inborn woman. What's the difference? Ren Baqin was a little curious after hearing the Empress mention it. You want to know? I'm really a little curious. Do you want to see? Ren Baqin wisely chose to give up his curiosity when he saw the Empress's increasingly dangerous gaze. It's meaningless to think about it. Forget it, I won't look. The Empress would always be the Empress. Even if she became his wife, she would still be the Empress and he couldn't afford to provoke her. After staying for 7 days, Rinpoche and the Empress returned to Dayo. They first went to the plain that they had been to a few days ago, and they didn't expect to see the people from the Ministry of Works there. Even Tong Jinye was there. He had his hands on his hips, licked the toothpaste in one hand and fished with his little penis from time to time. When Rinpoche and the Empress returned, there was a snake-like fish with fangs hanging on Tong Jinye's little penis. Upon seeing the two of them, he quickly pulled the fish down, pulled up his pants and greeted them indifferently. Rinpoche was shocked on the spot. "Old man, you are really a talent." Chapter 880. Rinpoche had always known that Tong Jinye wasn't a good person, but he didn't expect him to be like this. This was beyond his imagination. Rinpoche was dumbfounded. Oh, the Empress was almost the same. Sigma, after all, Tong Jinye had done such a big thing, so it was normal for him to feel awkward for a moment. However, Tong Jinye looked calm and collected. "Sir Tong, what are you doing?" Rinpoche hesitated and asked cautiously. "It tastes good." Tong Jinye waved the toothpaste in his hand. "It can even produce foam. I have a box of it in my residence." "I'm not talking about this. Sir Tong, what were you doing just now?" Rinpoche gestured. "I went to relieve myself in the morning, but a blind dog bit me." Tong Jinye had a wretched look on his face. Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. However, he thought about it again and realized that it wasn't right. Tong Jinye said it was in the morning, but the sun was already high above their heads. The people in this world did not have the habit of sleeping in the wee hours of the morning and waking up at noon. If they said it was morning, then it was really morning. They usually woke up at around 4 o'clock, cleaned up and had something to eat. At around 6 o'clock, they had to go to the palace and attend court at 7 o'clock. "Sir Tong, it's noon now." Rinpoche pointed to the top of his head. "I want to see if its teeth are harder or my spear is sharper." Tong Jinye's face was full of pride. At this moment, Rinpoche finally knew from whom Tong Lan learned how to raise her small face and put on an arrogant expression. "Then it was the whole morning?" Tong Jinye waved at Rinpoche, grabbed him by the neck and walked out while whispering, "Hey Zhao Prince Consort, let me tell you. This thing looks scary and has a mouth full of fangs, but it doesn't have any in its throat. Instead it keeps sucking. I reckon that this thing is used to swallowing things in its stomach. It looks scary and quite comfortable." Rinpoche, underscore winky face this time, "Even God won't be able to save you. Are you whispering to me with that voice of yours? Why do I hear that you are showing off?" The clouds behind the Empress had turned into a typhoon. Rinpoche could clearly feel that the surrounding air pressure had dropped. He hurriedly jumped 10 meters away to keep a distance from Tong Jinye. Unexpectedly, the Empress didn't flare up. Before the storm swept out, she withdrew it. Ignoring Tong Jinye, she said faintly, "I want to fish. I'll get a fishing rod for Her Majesty." Rinpoche had a bad feeling about this. "No need." The Empress smiled at Tong Jinye and said, "Minister of Works, I want to fish. I'll have to trouble you to be the bait." Tong Jinye's tone sounded like an exclamation mark. In the next second, the Empress kicked Tong Jinye to the ground. Then she lifted his calf and threw his upper body into the river. Seeing that he was trying to move, she kicked him. Tong Jinye immediately lost all his strength. Other than the calf that the Empress was holding onto, his entire body was submerged in the water. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Empress threw Tong Jinye out of the river. He was 400 kilograms when he went into the water, and when he came back up he became 300 kilograms. His body was covered with those strange, black, snake-like fish. After fishing for an afternoon, they caught more than 2,000 kilograms of strange fish. One of them was 6 to 7 meters long and was thicker than a bucket. Could swallow Tong Jinye directly. If it really swallowed him, the consequences would be obvious. That night, Rinpoche and the others ate that strange fish. Even though this strange fish didn't look very good, its flesh was extremely tender and had very few bones. It was very praiseworthy. In particular, Rinpoche discovered that the worms on the strange fish could add a lot of flavor to the soup, and their effects were similar to chicken essence. This was because Rinpoche cleaned the fish that he and the Empress caught. After cooking it, he found that Tong Jinye's fish was much more delicious. He could smell that it was different from his own fish from afar. At first, he thought that it was because the fish was too big, which made the taste worse. After trying it out, he realized that the problem was actually with the worms on the strange fish. At first, Rinpoche was prepared to kill as many strange fish as possible in the river, but he changed his mind at this time. This fish tasted good, contained a lot of energy and had very few bones. The aboriginals who didn't like to eat fish should be able to accept it. Besides, weren't those little worms the best chicken essence? These two kinds of creatures had a lot of value in breeding. Naturally, Rinpoche wasn't thinking about how to make money. Instead, he was thinking about how to rely on these things to drive a batch of industries and support a lot of people. Although he had a lot of things that could drive a batch of industries, these were more suitable for the aboriginals. Rinpoche had always intended to lure the aboriginals out of the 60,000 mountains. However, the aboriginals were different from the ordinary people who had lived on the plains for decades. They were more ferocious and they were naturally very good at fighting, hunting, and even killing. If they weren't too scattered, they could be directly used as elite soldiers. However, they were much worse in other aspects, especially in terms of their ferocious temperaments. The people of Lan City were also ferocious, but the aboriginals were used to using swords, which could easily cause trouble. If Rinpoche wanted to use these aboriginals, he had to first let them get used to life on the plains, which was completely different from fighting and killing in the mountains. On the other hand, farming was not a bad idea. This river could feed tens of thousands of people without a problem. Rinpoche took note of this matter and walked around this remote area with the Empress for a few days. He also asked the people from the Ministry of Works to measure the land on the plains between the two rivers before returning. Just as Rinpoche returned to the palace, a convoy arrived in Lan City. It was a majestic convoy of hundreds of ox carts. The ruts on each cart were deep, and one could tell at a glance that the carts were filled with goods. Military advisor Ching, is this Lan City? Are we going to this godforsaken place to get food? The curtain of a carriage was lifted, and a man with a full beard poked his head in. Qing Lian was holding a book in one hand and drawing something on a wooden board with the other. When she heard Rinpoche's question, she didn't even raise her head and said, "This is Dayo. Spirit wheel experts are everywhere and earth wheel experts are like dogs. Perhaps the person who passed by you is an earth wheel expert. If they hear what you said, don't expect me to save you. You aren't the only envoy who has died in Lan City over the years." Is it that exaggerated? The burly man coughed dryly. He knew that there were many aboriginal experts. The aboriginal commoners he met along the way were all at the man-wheel level, which was indeed terrifying. However, based on what he had seen and heard along the way, there weren't many earth-wheel experts either. Of course, the number of earth-wheel experts was much higher than that of Great Xia. However, according to Qing Lian, it was too exaggerated. Do you think this is Great Xia? Here, without the strength of a spirit wheel expert, one can't even enter the imperial court. Qing Lian pouted. The reason why you saw so few earthwheel experts along the way is that most of them have joined the militia and are now busy plundering in the Yin nation and guarding the captives. But where is this? This is the capital of Dayo. Let me remind you, look more and talk less. It doesn't matter if you die, but if there is any delay, I will let Kongming-zi summon your soul back and torture it for 100 years. Upon hearing the words Kongming-zi, the burly man's expression changed slightly. He put down the curtain, turned his head and muttered a few words. Idiot. Qing Lian moved her lips in the carriage. She wasn't afraid that he would hear her from outside. This General Huaiji was really an idiot. Chapter 881. It was the second day since Rinpoche met Qing Lian. In fact, Rinpoche already knew that this group had passed through Ping City 13 days ago. He only found out last night that Qing Lian was with them. Early the next morning, Rinpoche saw a graceful lady waiting in front of the academy. He had arranged to meet Qing Lian in the afternoon, but when he saw her now, he understood that she was here to familiarize herself with him. After all, she was his student, so he didn't say much and let her in. They sat down and Rinpoche looked at Qing Lian. After more than a year in the volunteer army, she hadn't changed much. Her skin hadn't darkened and she hadn't become more resolute. She seemed to be the same gentle lady from back then. Principal. I'm here to return the books. Qing Lian had a wide forehead and a big mouth, but these weren't flaws on her face. She was very beautiful when she smiled. The most important thing was that she had a scholarly temperament, which was rare in this world. Rinpoche brought a few books over. 3 of them were about mathematics and the other 2 were about probability. One of them even touched on calculus. For this world, this was rather advanced knowledge. Alright, on Earth, this was considered a rather complicated knowledge. Who knew how many people would wish they were dead? In any case, Rinpoche knew that it would be as difficult as defeating the Empress if he wanted to pass. Do you understand? Rinpoche had a kind smile on his face, but his heart was full of malice. He wanted to let the natives of this world experience the power of calculus. He originally wanted to lock his students in the classroom in a few years and let them pull their hair out in front of calculus. He didn't expect someone to see it in advance. I understand most of it, but there's one thing I don't quite understand. I was just about to ask you. There's still something I don't understand about the fixed point theorem. Qing Lian took out a wooden board and used a hairpin to engrave numbers on it. Here, let f be a continuous mapping from a sphere to itself. There must be a point C such that fc equals C, or C. That is, f either has a fixed point or a point that maps to its opposite point. The smile on Rinpoche's face immediately froze. The terrifying memory of being dominated by calculus resurfaced in his mind. He felt a toothache and the urge to pull his hair out. Oh, he had no hair now. Stop. Rinpoche quickly stopped her and asked with a strange expression, "Are you here to test me today?" "How could I? I'm also a student of Principal Zhang, and I'm here today to ask for advice. I don't think anyone in this world can answer my question except for you." Qing Lian blinked her eyes and said. She thought about the reason why Rinpoche had rejected her. The probability of the reason being true was 30%, the probability of not being able to answer was 50%, and the other possibilities were 20%. In other words, there was a 50% probability that Rinpoche could answer her question. The probability of him meeting someone who could answer this question within 3 years was 1 in a million. In 10 years the probability was 1 in 10,000. In 20 years the probability was 1 in 100. This probability would increase with time. In other words, there was a high probability that he would meet someone who could answer his questions after 20 years. That was too long. He still had to rely on Zhao Prince Consort. Rinpoche inexplicably got goosebumps all over his body. He suddenly felt that Qing Lian's calm and serene expression was probably a demon, right? Rinpoche would never touch calculus again. However, he couldn't admit defeat at this time. The batch of students that you know will graduate in 2 months. After graduation, some of them will continue to learn more advanced knowledge. If you can give up everything and return to the academy, I will teach you about calculus. I borrowed your books because you are sincere about learning, but now, in what capacity are you asking me for advice? Rinpoche felt that he had found a good excuse. After all, she wasn't a student of the academy anymore, but a military counselor of a great Xia volunteer army. You aren't my student now, so I naturally won't answer such a profound question. Well, this reason wasn't very good, but Rinpoche couldn't think of a better one, so he didn't reveal his fear. Qing Lian was stunned and then pursed her lips into a smile. I was too presumptuous. Following which, he smiled extremely brilliantly and proposed a request that had a success rate of 87%. In order to better communicate with Dayo, Duke Su wants to send an envoy to Lan City. I want to settle some matters and become the envoy. When the time comes, Principal Ren, please don't reject me from returning to the residence to study. Rinpoche was surprised. Send an envoy? In what name? Su Gong was Su Qing, who established himself after the uprising. At this time, although the volunteer army had reached a scale of 1 million people, it was still a peasant army after all. It was normal to want some help from Dayo, but sending an envoy to Dayo was more interesting. In the name of King Ping. Qing Lian smiled. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche tapped his fingers on the table as he pondered. Great Xia had almost exhausted its vitality in the previous 2 wars with Dayo. In addition, corrupt officials imposed exorbitant taxes, and there were spies sent by Su Qing. People in many places had no way to make a living. Su Qing started with the slogan "Equal Rations." This slogan swept a large number of people who couldn't survive. In addition, Great Xia was short of soldiers at that time, so it became popular in a short period of time. Although Great Xia's elite soldiers were almost wiped out, there were still many valiant generals in the imperial court. After 1 or 2 years they trained a group of soldiers who could fight. Although they lost half of their power, they gradually stabilized their position. At this time, both sides were in a state of tug-of-war, and it would be difficult to make a breakthrough in a short period of time. Under such circumstances, Su Qing wanted to proclaim himself king. Rinpoche thought about it. In a situation where it was difficult to make progress in a short period of time, proclaiming himself king wasn't the best way, but it could also calm people down. It would be reasonable if he sent an envoy after proclaiming himself king. As for more details, I will tell you when I have an audience with Her Highness in the afternoon. Qing Lian bowed slightly. Rinpoche nodded. In the afternoon, he would have an audience with Her Highness as an envoy, which would be a public affair. Now he was indeed here as a private person. Unfortunately, why did he mention calculus? I want to borrow a few more books to read. You won't refuse me, right? Just now you said that you saw my sincerity in learning. Qing Lian said as she tucked her hair behind her ear. Go. Rinpoche waved his hand. Take your wooden board away. I'll leave it here. If I don't understand it when I come again, I will have to wait for you to answer my questions when I return to the academy. Qing Lian bowed again before retreating. Rinpoche sat in the chair, looked at the symbols on the wooden board, and felt his brain and teeth begin to hurt. A long time after Qing Lian left, Rinpoche carried the wooden board out, dug a hole and buried it in it. Only then did he feel a little better. He sat back in his office and began to ponder. Although Qing Lian had learned mathematics before, it was at most at the junior high school level. When it came to Rinpoche, she had systematically learned modern geometry and algebra in elementary and junior high school. He didn't expect to learn calculus now. Without anyone to teach her, she had learned high school and university mathematics by herself, and had reached a very high level. This was another cheat. He had to admit that there were always some people in the world who were loved by heaven and earth. For example, the Empress was good at martial arts, Ning Kaichen was on earth, and this Qing Lian, huh? Rinpoche suddenly thought of something. Ning Kaichen and Qing Lian? Did he only know two sword masters? Both of them were so talented? Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Did he meet even geniuses? Rinpoche suddenly remembered that 1,000 years ago, there was a magnificent period when thousands of sword masters were born and fought against each other, leaving behind quite a bit of fame. However, that period was too long ago and the records were vague, so he didn't think too much about it. After that, sword masters were prohibited from entering the imperial court as officials. The reason was very simple. Sword masters needed a lot of resources to build the sword cleansing pool, so the possibility of corruption and bribery was too high. In addition, sword masters had to spend a lot of energy to buy rare treasures for the sake of their lifespan. They even spent a long time searching for them in barren mountains and forests. Naturally, they gradually became less eye-catching. However, at this time, Rinpoche suddenly realized a problem after having some doubts in his heart. How many of the spirit wheel experts from 1,000 years ago were recorded in the history books and spread throughout the world? Perhaps even the disciples of their own sects didn't know about them. 1,000 years and dozens of generations were really too long. Sword masters didn't have a long lifespan, and there were very few spirit wheel experts. The number of sword masters was definitely less than that of martial artists. Under such circumstances, being able to leave a heavy mark in history wasn't just because of strength, right? Could it be that the sword master's skills were wrong? Even though they couldn't practice martial arts, they were far more talented than ordinary people in other aspects? If that was the case, it would be a little scary. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.